Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kyuubi offers Naruto his help for Chunin exams part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto stood, breathing heavily as he saved Sasuke's life just seconds ago. With a kunai in each embedded into the nose of hidden grass, Ninja's enormous snake summon, he held it back. Sasuke stared shakingly at Naruto with eyes full of surprise and fear. "Hey, you alright?" Naruto panted as he chuckled softly and slowly lifted his head while everyone looked at him dumbfounded. Staring dead at the shaken Uchiha, Naruto smiled awkwardly with his bloodied face. "Scaredy cat." A small light of recognition registered in Sasuke's eyes as he heard those words. Suddenly a tongue stretched down from above and wrapped around Naruto's body. Slowly lifting him, he was slowly turned to see the tongue belonged to the grass ninja. Naruto struggled in vain against the ninja's slimy grip. "Damn it. Let me go." The ninja laughed as he looked at Naruto in slight awe. "So the Nine-Tails brat is still alive." He grabbed his right hand with his left hand and quickly started pushing chakra into his fingertips. "When your emotions are heightened, the power of the Nine-Tails overflows. How interesting." He lifted Naruto's shirt and his eyes widened slightly. Slowly he let his chakra fade from his hand. The seal on Naruto's stomach was clearly visible and was glowing a slight orange. But that is not what stopped the grass ninja in his tracks. No, he looked up and took in Naruto's struggling appearance and saw what brought him rage like he hadn't felt since he lost the Hokage seat to Minato. "You son of a bitch bastard Minato. You had a child with that red-headed bitch and he inherited your damn luck of impossible life-saving miracles." The seal on Naruto's stomach had somehow altered itself to the point that if any other seals were to be placed on it would crumble and release the Nine-Tails itself. The grass ninja wanted Naruto out of the way his way, but he didn't want a Biju raining hell down on his head. Something needed to be done though, for he knew Naruto would grow to be a dangerous foe. Finally a conclusion came to him. A quick and simple one. The ninja chuckled as he suddenly tossed Naruto high into the sky. "Say hello to your parents for me, Naruto." Unable to do anything in midair, Naruto watched through one open eye as the ninja threw several kunai he had stored chakra in at him. All he could focus on was the points of the kunai as they rushed towards him. 1 second they seemed miles away and the next all he knew was pain as they tore through his body, rocketing it away from his teammates and the enemy ninja. Sasuke and Sakura watched as Naruto was essentially torn to shreds right before their eyes. Neither one believed there was any way the blonde would survive. Naruto, they both thought before Sasuke launched himself at the grass ninja. "You bastard. I'll make you pay for this." He yelled as he drew several kunai and shuriken into his hands. His Sharingan spinning wildly as it advanced to its next stage. The grass ninja grinned as he prepared to fight the enraged Uchiha, but froze and cursed his luck as he felt multiple presences enter the forest of Anbu level. Quickly he launched his neck out and caught Sasuke in midair, biting down into his neck and leaving a foul chakra mark behind before let going and fleeing. Sasuke dropped to the floor as pain coursed throughout his body. He screamed out in agony as he fell back to the ground. He convulsed on the ground before passing out. "Sasuke." Sakura screeched fearfully. She rushed over to him with a tear-stained face. "I'm going to die." Tears flowed down Naruto's cheeks as he flew over the trees. "I'm actually going to die." Blood trailing behind him fell into the forest of death, assisting and slowly quenching its thirst for blood. Here in this goddamn forest at some freaking's hands. Sakura could be heard screaming Sasuke's name in the distance. "Damn. Damn. Damn. I can't die yet. I haven't achieved what I've wanted." Naruto began to fall back into the forest. "I'm not Hokage yet. I haven't made Sakura notice me. I'm still a nobody." He began slamming through trees' limbs. "No. I can't die here. I won't die here." Slowly the world began to darken for Naruto. I will become more than this, so be it." Just before his world went black, everything was quickly tinted crimson red. Being hit by a wall of pain like never before, Naruto gasped for just a second before instantly and gratefully losing consciousness. Everything was wet. Naruto slowly opened his eyes as he felt his body was surrounded by water. He tried to move, but none of his muscles would respond to their commands. Moving was apparently completely out of the question. The air around him was completely still and it was almost pitch black. The outlines of pipelines along the ceiling could just barely be made out. The water strangely was neither cold, hot, nor was it even in between them. It didn't even have a current to it, yet he was slowly floating across the water towards an unknown destination. Naruto's mind was so scrambled that even though he knew something was wrong, he didn't try to resist any more than the little he already had. Just let his body be dragged away by an invisible force. It felt like months had passed as Naruto continued to drift along non-stop. Nothing about his surroundings had changed at all. The dark outlined pipelines repeated the same pattern over and over again. No air could be felt blowing through the tunnel. The current-less water still was without a temperature to it somehow, and Naruto continued to not move. By now he was pretty sure he had died. But he was unable to survive the encounter with the grass ninja. He had always dreamed of battles to the death, but he never dreamed that he would be treated like a rag doll by a ninja he felt was just toying with him. Hell. I've died and gone to hell. He closed his eyes to shut out the depressing view he was given. I made a new dream. Just got a new goal, and I didn't even get a chance to go after it. Heat slowly began to fill the air as it stirred slightly. Alive I was hated. Unloved by what I wanted to protect. Treated like an outcast in my own village. In danger constantly in my own home. A steady dripping noise began to filter around Naruto in the otherwise silent corridor. Who was I kidding? I never had a chance at anything. Not Sakura. Not completing this exam. Not being awarded the Hokage seat. Slowly his body began to sink deeper into the water that slid coolly against his exposed skin. Should just have given up. I was meant to die. I was meant for hell. No. Naruto's eyes slowly opened as he heard a soft melodious voice whisper into his ear. As they opened he finally took note to the changes that had occurred. Again he tried to move his body and was able to twitch his fingers, but that wasn't much progress. When his eyes fully opened Naruto slowly took in his new surroundings. He was in an enormous open space that was shaped somewhat like an egg around the edges. There were large red pillars that stood in what would be considered the middle of the air and stretched high into the darkness above. They were spaced close together, but just far enough apart to fit 3 people through at once. Except for 2 that were firmly pressed together. The water around him was a reddish black that became redder the closer it was to him. He continued to drift for a while longer. Passing through the pillars and towards a wall of darkness before 2 hands reached down and stopped him. Naruto's eyes took in the small pale hands that had a soft but firm grip on his shoulders, following up their slender arms to find a face of a sad woman. Her hair flowed down her face in soft waves, and even though it was a deep dark red, it was somehow glowing around the edges. A slim face with a small nose separating 2 light purple eyes and a scar just above the left eye. The woman seemed to be on the verge of tears. "No," she said. "You are not meant for hell, Naruto. You are meant to be something so much greater." Naruto stared at the woman for a beat before trying to move again. Everything was stiff, but he was able to at least sit up. It was a slow process of movement, but he eventually came to be almost level with the woman. "Are you a mind reader?" was the first thing to pop out of his mouth. Chuckling softly, she shook her head no. "Sadly I am not. But you know awesome that would be if I could." Naruto smirked slightly at her faint attempt to joke with him before looking at her a bit more closely. Even kneeling he could tell that she was a little on the tall side. Her hair cascaded all the down to water and wrapped around her like a curtain, with much of it floating on top of it away from her. The hair hit her legs and immediately gave him a picture of her floating above the water without them that he had to shake away. She had slim figure on her with a pair just slightly smaller than his head. A plain black shirt was the only noticeable clothing on her. Suddenly he noticed that she was holding him on top of the water with her hands. "Can you tell me where we are? Also who are and if you can't read minds, why did you say what you did then?" Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly as he tried to puzzle the last part out himself. You can call me a cane," she said making Naruto smile at her, "and we are currently somewhere no else can get." Naruto tilted his head and scrunched his face up in confusion. "But that makes no sense. How can no one else get here if I can?" "If you can." The cane shifted slightly. "This place. It's a mindscape. Your mindscape to be exact. No one other than you can come in here without your consent. So we are really just in your head, you know. After you were blown away and the pain knocked you out, you came into yourself." She could see the question forming in his eyes as he stared at her accusingly and rushed to answer him before he voiced it. "Me, I've always been here, you know. Been with you since the day you were born. That's why I said what I said earlier. After being here so long I've been able to tune into your thoughts. I know more about you than any other person in the world does, Naruto." For a moment Naruto was silent. He looked away from a cane and down at the arms that were holding him above the water. "You've been here my entire life." She nodded then said yes when he still didn't look up at her. "How? Why are you here?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish as she tried to answer the question. The subject was obviously very delicate. "I guess there is no avoiding it. I have to tell him sooner or later," she thought sadly. Nodding she waved a hand as she loosened her grip on Naruto slightly and conjured a small, circular table with 2 matching chairs into existence. Standing slowly, a cane carried him over to the chairs, then set him in one before sitting herself in the other. "I could have just walked, you know." He grumbled quietly. "How did you make these chairs and table appear like that?" The cane sighed and looked down at her hands that she had clasped in front of her on the table. "Being here so long has given me a small ability to bend reality in your mind, you know. Now I don't want to repeat myself, so please don't say anything until I finish." Naruto was going to ask why when she looked up at him and their eyes met. So much same seemed to cloud those light eyes that it shocked him into silence. I wasn't always with you, you know. I used to have a complete life of my own before I ended up here. But something terrible happened and my power was used to cause harm to others in a large scale. I never wanted to hurt anyone, but I wasn't in control, you know. A man with a Sharingan had me in a mind control jutsu. Naruto silently cursed those eyes and all the Uchiha who ever achieved them. Anyways, after a real major battle with a very powerful man, I was sealed away into a woman to be kept in check, you know. That man was your first Hokage Senju Hashirama, and the man who controlled me was Uchiha Madara. Naruto's eyes widened in disbelief and started to say something when Akane held up a hand to quiet him. Don't interrupt me. Whether you believe it yet or not doesn't matter. You will soon enough. Now, after I was sealed, I essentially gained back some of my will that had been stolen from me by Madara, but any sense of freedom I had was completely gone. In a way, I guess it was better than being forced to kill those I never wanted to, you know. Anyway, since then I have constantly been sealed inside of someone. Well, almost constantly. On the day that my second Jinchuriki, what you guys are technically called, gave birth, I was ripped out of her, almost causing her death and set free. But I was immediately met with the power of the Sharingan again and was once more a mindless puppet bent on destroying everything in my path. That was the day I rampaged over Konoha 12 years ago. And the rest. Slowly she trailed off as she lowered her head. Knowing that he already knew all there was left to say, Naruto sat in stunned silence as he absorbed all of what he just heard and pieced together what she left off. You're the Kyuubi. You're the reason I lived the way I have had to all these years. Akane nodded and shrunk down into her chair as he had spoken barely above a whisper. Clenching and unclenching his fist, Naruto relived every moment he tried to understand why he was so hated. Each moment he was told that the shopkeepers didn't sell to his kind. Each time he ran for his life with a mob of enraged civilians trailing him. Then a thought dawned on him. Your last Jinchuriki, was she my mother, and what happened to her if you only almost killed her? Akane's only answer was the stiffening of her body. That was all the answer he needed. You ruined my life in every possible way before I even had the chance to live it. Why shouldn't I hate you even if none of this was your fault? At the word hate, Akane looked at Naruto, almost feeling completely defeated. For a moment there wasn't a demon capable of destroying millions of lives for pleasure in front of him, he realized. Just a long-lived woman with nothing left in her life. You have every right to hate me, Naruto. But believe me when I say I loved your mother. She was my very first friend and I was so happy to be with her, you know. And I love you, Naruto. Just like I would my very own kid if I had one. You're so much like a daughter to me. I see. Well, wait. What did you just say? I'm no girl, I'm all man. Can't you see that, or are you blind? Naruto scowled at Akane as she pulled away from the table somewhat. And not anymore. That ninja did a pretty decent number on your body, you know. It took a lot of my power to keep you alive. Certain places, Akane said, while stressing the word certain places, were pretty much done for. So I changed you into a girl. Keeping you a boy would have given you a horrible case of ed. Naruto shivered at the abbreviation, thinking of how bad it would be to have Mr. Happy completely out of commission. Better gone forever than hanging there useless. What the fuck could cause it though? I guess I understand you, he sighed, but I have a question. Akane sat up slightly straighter as he seemed a bit warmer than he did just minutes ago. If I'm a girl now, why do I still look and sound like a boy? Oh, that's because this is who you are. On the outside you are a girl. But on the inside you are a guy, you know. You are literally a man stuck in a woman's body. And don't worry about your attitude or preferences changing much. So no need to worry about getting into guys unless you are secretly gay, that is. I'm not gay. I know. Just giving an example. For a moment the two sat in relative silence. The water around had drained to the point their feet could touch the floor and they wouldn't be drowning. There was also a slight breeze passing along, taking tension away with it a little at a time. So will you tell me about my mother? What was she like and what she did for fun? Tell me who her friends were and how close they were, do you think? Was she a ninja like me? How did she meet my father? Wait, who is my father? Was he a ninja too or something? Did he love her? Why is the questions just came rolling out of him as they came. There was someone in front of him that had all the answers to them and he needed them. Slowly Akane reached over to Naruto like he was a frightened rabbit and took his hands into hers. Not yet, Naruto, but after this part of the exam is over. I'll tell you everything you want to know about your mother after that, but your father is a different story. I'll tell you about him another time. Naruto grumbled and puffed out his cheeks like a baby. Akane chuckled slightly at the sight and shook her head before looking him in the eyes again. Until then, Naruto, let me help you. I can train you even if I can't leave your mind. If you gave me the chance I could open the door to an entire new world of jutsu for you, you know. Assist you in understanding things you couldn't before. Help you truly become more. Naruto was caught by the sincerity in both her voice and beautiful purple eyes that seemed to have brightened right before his. He knew even without thinking about it that he would accept her offer. Not only was she truly and honestly sincere about helping him, but the chance to truly become more, be more than what he has come to be or would have turned into, was just too great an offer to pass up. So all he did was nod and watch her smile for the first time since he saw her. Great. As soon as we have a chance we'll get right to it. Now it's time for me to send you back and wake you up. Naruto stood and stretched out his arms and legs. So how do you plan on doing that? Standing as well, she walked over to him and placed her hand on his chest. Giving him a slight chakra-filled shove she pushed him out of his mindscape. Akane closed her eyes and sat on the weakening table as the chairs rotted away. I won't fail him, Kushina. I sweared. The girl slowly opened her eyes to see a canopy of trees far above her with pinpricks of moonlight filtering through to her. She was laying down on the ground of the forest floor. The ground was cold from the night air that was blowing and she decided to stand up. When she did she found that her clothes were ripped to shreds, almost exposing her completely to the world. What do I do now? I can't possibly walk around like this. Naruto, a slightly disembodied voice said into the girl's head. Jumping slightly, she whirled around trying to find the source of the voice. Naruto. It's just me. Your time and your mindscape unlocked a mental link for us. Now we can talk whenever you want to, you know. All you have to do is think and I'll hear you. And if you don't want to talk just think the connection over. Sighing her relief that she wasn't going insane, the girl began to walk away when she stepped on something squishy yet firm. Looking down, she saw the dead body of a male sand ninja. His lower half was smashed under a pile of rocks, while the back of his head was obviously smashed from how flattened it looked. Blood was sprayed across the front of his shirt and face with some of it dripping into his wide open mouth and eyes. What the hell? Akane, what kinda messed up shit is this? Looking around she saw two more dead sand ninja at the edges of what seemed to be a crater. The furthest one from her was missing his head, while the other one's arms were gone and half his face was nothing more than a bloody mess. This happened when you crash landed. You slammed into these unfortunate bastards. You hit them with so much force you killed two of them instantly, you know. The other guy, the one you stepped on, suffered a bit before finally dying. Kept yelling about sand for some reason. Oh. Looking at their prone bodies, the girl saw something that made her heart do backflips in her chest. Moving over to the second body closest to her, she found the boy held both the heaven and earth scroll in his pouch. Quickly tying the pouch to her leg the girl made to take off and leave. Wait. Stopping mid-jump the girl ended up tripping and face planting hard onto the rough ground. Sorry, but you should hinge into your original self to move around for now so that no one knows what happened to you. Also your new body is different in more ways than one and you won't be able to fight probably in it. Nodding and then hinging into her old self, Naruto stood and brushed the dirt of her tattered clothing. Thanks. Looking down at her hands, Naruto thought of everything wrong he had done with this body. From the pranks he pulled on the wrong people to not rejecting what he should have done. Having a new body was like having a new life. She could do things all over again and completely different. And Akane, for everything that has happened to me in my life, I don't blame you and would like to try and be your second friend. Cutting the connection before anything more could be said, Naruto leaped away to find her missing teammates. Somehow knowing exactly what direction they would be in. But as she searched she felt something she hadn't felt since she met Iruka. A true sense of knowing that you're making the right choice and trusting someone. Deep inside of her that someone could be found smiling softly with tears of joy. The trees were blurs as Naruto flew through the forest of death. While running she tried to feel out anything different with her body, but there was unable to notice anything out of the ordinary. Her sight hadn't changed, her sense of smell was still above average, but that was already normal for her. She didn't feel any stronger now and in a way it was irritating not to have any significant change than from boy to girl. Hey Akane. I thought you should that I was stronger now. Akane sighed and rolled around on the remains of the rotten table. I never said anything like that, Naruto. All I said was that you wouldn't be able to fight properly without training in your new body, you know. I didn't say you were stronger. Though you're in for a surprise when we begin training, she thought with a slight giggle. Don't be laughing at me in there, Akane. Naruto sped up in an attempt to use the sound of the wind to block out Akane, who was for some reason laughing like a maniac now. After a few more minutes of running, Naruto came to a stop on the edge of a clearing. In the clearing he saw 4 different teams looking like they had just finished a standoff. There was his team along with the Inoshikacho trio and the team with the guy in the green spandex suit and the Hyuga on one side, while the sound team that had randomly attacked Kabuto was on the other. Don't move, Naruto. Akane said just as she was about to jump out into the open. Don't reveal yourself just yet. For now just watch. Naruto silently agreed and settled into her position while she watched and listened to what was happening in the clearing. Sakura was hugging Sasuke as the mummified sound nin held out an earth scroll to them. You are strong, he said, gaining a surprised look from the 8-leaf nin in front of him. Sasuke, we can't defeat you at this time. Here's a gift to you, please let us leave. Setting down the scroll, the sound nin moved to pick up his fallen teammates. No one moved to stop him. This may seem convenient, but there is something we must find out now. But I will promise you this, if there is another situation where we meet in this exam, we will neither run nor hide. This makes no sense, Naruto thought. I obviously missed a lot. Hush. Pay attention, Naruto. The sound Nin began to leave before Sakura's voice stopped him. Wait. She cried out. Who is Orochimaru? What did he do to Sasuke? Why to Sasuke? Something was done to Sasuke. Damn, it must have happened after that freak got rid of me. Naruto's fist tightened as she thought of the grass Nin. I don't know, we were merely ordered to kill Sasuke. For a moment he looked down with a strange expression after answering Sakura, but shook it off and fled with his teammates on his shoulders. For a moment everything was still until the Ino Shikacho trio rushed towards Naruto's team. Hey, you guys alright? Choji called out. This sucks, but Ino, you take care of Lee. Shikamaru stood in between Lee and Ino, and Sasuke, Sakura, and Choji looking irritated, if only slightly roughed up, as usually. Sasuke was holding his arm as trembled and was mumbling to himself. As Ino was tending to Lee, his teammates jumped down and landed beside him. I'll take from here. The girl with brown hair stuck into two buns bent down and grabbed Lee by the collar. Wow, she has a nice ass. Naruto. Don't be a pervert. Akane was frowning as she oogled the girl's backside. Sorry, but I can't help looking. Naruto wiped away a bit of drool, feeling slightly embarrassed. The girl proceeded to shake Lee quite violently while yelling at him. Snap out of it. Lee. Lee. After the girl let her go, Lee slowly came around. Tenten, why are you here? He asked. Hey. Where are the sound Nin? We came to save you. She replied, slightly frustrated with her teammate. Oh, and that Sasuke kid drove them off. Lee nodded his understanding. Why did you break the plan and act alone? Plus you are all beaten up. Sakura was in trouble, and as a man, Tenten waved off his excuse with a shake of her head. The Hyuga stood next to her and frowned at Lee before looking at Sasuke. He seemed to be deep in thought about a problem. Hey you guys. Ino looked around as everyone looked at her. There's been something that's been bothering me since we got here. Where's Naruto? The others, besides Sasuke and Sakura, seemed to just notice that there were a blonde-haired boy short since the very beginning. Did he get lost or something? Cause I doubt someone as thick-headed as him would chicken out. Sakura's head fell slightly as Sasuke gritted his teeth. Can I come out now? Naruto asked Akane. Yeah. Sakura shook her head and looked at everyone. Naruto was just as she was going to say that Naruto had been killed in their last battle. She sprung out of the trees and landed in a pose much like a particular pervert would make. Hey Sakura. You miss me? She smiled widely at a stunned Sakura and Sasuke as they stepped back. The two trembled as if they were seeing a ghost. Hey you knucklehead, where have you been? Ino screeched as she stomped her way in front of Naruto. Do you even know what these two have been through while you have been off doing Kami knows what in this damn forest? If we hadn't shown up when we did, you wouldn't have a team anymore. Not like you. You can't be here. Sakura's wavering voice cut Ino off in the middle of her rant. She was shaking as she stared wide-eyed at Naruto. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't even be alive, right? Not. Hey, Naruto may not be the best ninja we have, but is that really called for Sakura? Shikamaru looked between Naruto and Sakura, trying to gauge the situation. Shut up, Shikamaru. You weren't there. You didn't see what happened. This guy is an imposter. Naruto was killed. Sakura was slowly beginning to panic at the sight of her supposedly dead teammate. Ino stepped forward looking slightly uncomfortable. Hey, calm down, Sakura. Don't joke about that stuff. Especially not in a place like this. I'm not joking. Naruto is dead. Hey, Sakura, it's me. Naruto. Can't you tell it's me when you see me? Naruto took a step forward only to be forced back by both Sasuke and the Hyuga, appearing in front of her in fighting stances. What the hell? Sasuke. Come on, you gotta be kidding me here. The dope is dead. The Uchiha said coldly, causing Naruto to flinch slightly. Me and Sakura saw Orochimaru tear Naruto apart with a load of kunai. Silence consumed the area as everyone took in what Sasuke had just said. The first to break the silence was Shikamaru with a loud sigh. How troublesome can you guys get? Can't you tell that's Naruto? Sakura rushed to argue back. He cut her off. I mean, all you need to do is ask the guy one question if you don't believe me. The Hyuga, who was unfazed by any of what was going on around him, glanced momentarily at the Nara before looking back at Naruto. And what might that be? Taking a deep breath and leaning against a tree, the lazy kid lifted his hands. Real easy to know if you actually know the guy. Naruto, what is your favorite food? Naruto leaned back while grinning widely and putting his hands behind his head. That's easy. It's ramen noodles. The food given to us by Kami himself to cherish and worship for all eternity. The main place of worship is Ichiraku Ramen, since they sell the best ramen in the world. I mean, have you tasted their cooking there? It's amazing. It's like the go to Kami every day just to ask for a little more flavor in every noodle of every ramen dish. Everyone's sweat dropped as Naruto silently continued to rant about the ramen. In a quiet unanimous vote, everyone decided this was most definitely the real Naruto. Well, he's off being an idiot. We're going to the tower to finish this exam. Ino led her team out of the clearing to finish the test. Same here. Tenten said as she, the Hyuga prodigy, and Lee left, leaving Sasuke and a still shaking Sakura to watch and listen to Naruto. After a moment's hesitation, Sasuke turned away from Naruto and walked over to Sakura. I don't know how he survived what happened to him, but it seems like he found a way to do it. We'll ask when we get a chance what happened to him and where he was. He looks over his shoulder. But for now, let's collect some wood for a fire tonight. I need to walk or something and get away from that idiot. Just 10 minutes of him being back and I want to kill him. Sakura nods and follows Sasuke as he leaves for wood. Naruto was still continuing her talk about ramen. No for giving anyone great strength. It's why all the great ninja who ever lived ate before going into battle. Not only that, but Naruto dear, Akane sighed, everyone has left. You're the only left in the clearing anymore, you know. Stopping abruptly, she looked around and noticed she was alone. Those bastards ditched me. She yelled and stomped her feet. And to think I was worried about them when I came running for them. Oh, don't be such a big baby. Your teammates left to get wood for fire tonight, you know. They didn't leave you. The others have their own hides to worry about. Naruto huffed even though it made sense to her she didn't like being left behind. So forgetting them, let's worry about your hide at the moment. What are you going to tell your teammates about how you survived that grass nin's attack? Are you going to tell them the truth? For a moment Naruto entertained the idea of telling Sasuke and Sakura the truth, but quickly brushed it aside. No. I can't tell them yet. I can't tell anybody, as a matter of fact. I would lose them if they found out, and the adults would probably try and kill me if they knew I talked to you. No. Scratch that, they would try and kill me. Akane sighed sadly at how she affected Naruto's life. Hey, don't worry about Akane. None of this is really your fault when you really look at it. Those villagers have always had issues way before I was even born. Plus I have an idea of what to tell them, so don't you worry about a thing. Just need your help with one thing. Oh? And what might that be? I'm going to reveal myself after I finish this part of the exams have ended, so that by then I'll be a Chunin and things might be a bit easier for me. Thing is, when I do that, calling me Naruto might be a bit weird since I'm a girl now. So you know. So you need a new name then, right? What do you have in mind? Minako? No. Naruto was a little stunned at how fast Akane had dismissed the name she had chosen for herself, then was slightly angered. What's wrong with Minako? It's a wonderful name. No. I didn't mean it was a bad name. Just that there is another name. Sorta like you already have it for a name, you know. Oh? And how is that possible, If you hadn't noticed, I was born a boy. But moms come prepared with more than one name. Naruto quieted once Akane had said that. She hadn't thought that her mother might have planned for a girl, just in case she had one instead of a boy. She was going to name you Kimiko if you were a girl. Truth be told, she was really hungry when she thought up the name you've been living with your whole life, you know. Naruto chuckled softly to herself at Akane's small joke. Kimiko, huh? I like that name. I mean, I am the superior child of my team and all. Naruto laughed out loud as she adopted her new name that in a sense had always been her name. From this day forward, I shall be known as the Great Kimiko. What the hell? Naruto, Kimiko from now on, turned to see a confused Sasuke and a slightly disgusted Sakura. Kimiko stood frozen in place as she looked at her teammates. Naruto, what the hell are you doing? I was just yelling out to the world about this dream I had. Yeah. That's it. This dream I had about being called the Great Kimiko. She forced a laugh, hoping Sakura would buy the lie. Buy it. Sakura shook her head and set down the wood that was in her hands. Whatever. You're a weirdo. Sasuke grunted and did as Sakura did and then light the fire. The three sat around the fire as they began to settle in for the night. After a long moment of strained silence, Sakura turns to Kimiko with a troubled expression on her face. Naruto, she started. Alright. Here it comes. How did you survive Orochimaru's attack? I mean, anyone else would have died. Sasuke clasped his hands in front of his face and glared slightly at Kimiko. Taking a deep breath, she smiled at her two teammates. To be completely honest with you guys, I really don't know. Sasuke glared even harder at her, while Sakura blinked owlishly at her. Akane was doing the same, only while looking at her own hands and slightly chuckling hysterically. She's so fucked now. I remember seeing all those kunai flying at me and the next thing I knew I was in this cavern. All my wounds were fixed and someone had left these behind. She takes out the heaven and earth scrolls to hold them up triumphantly. Not believing what she was seeing, Sakura snatched away the scroll and examined them. Her eyes had gotten even wider. Man, if her eyes widen anymore, that's what she'll have for a head, both Sasuke and Naruto thought. These can't be real. THTH, they just can't be. Sakura started to slightly stutter. What are the chances that this eye isn't some kind of a bee bomb? Sasuke stood and took the scrolls away from her and compared them to the scroll the sound team left for them and the memory of their last scroll. "These are real Sakura," he said after a moment's pause. "Let's not worry about why they were left behind. Just get this exam over and done with. We head for the tower at first light." Sakura, after hesitating, agreed with Sasuke and went to lay her palette down to sleep. Sasuke watched Sakura until he was sure she was asleep and turned to Kimiko. "So what really happened, Naruto?" "Huh? But I just told you and Sakura what happened and that I don't really know all that much." Sasuke scoffed. "Don't insult me, Naruto. I'm a damn Uchiha. You can't lie to me that easily. Tell me the truth." Kimiko just shook her head and lifted her hands in a "what do you want from me" gesture. For a beat neither of them said a thing until Sasuke stood. "I'll find out eventually, Naruto. Whether you tell me or not." Sending her one last glare, he went to lay down just a small bit away from them. Sighing heavily, Kimiko flops onto her back. "Man, that guy is such a damn prick. Thought he was actually going to sit there until I told him. Maybe you should have let me help you make up the story, Kimiko." Akane felt like she had just watched a meteor just miss crashing into the world. "It might have been more solid if you had let me help." She waited for Kimiko to say something until she heard her snoring softly. "Well then. Wasn't like I was talking or anything. Just go right on," and Akane suddenly felt many presences surround Kimiko and her team. At first she was going to pour some of her chakra out to scare off whoever was planning to attack until she noticed that the presences seemed to be keeping others at bay. Howling began to echo throughout the forest as wolves kept the wild animals from getting close to Kimiko and the others. Strange. If anything, I thought foxes would show up to protect Kimiko. I wonder why the wolves have come out. Kimiko felt drained as she flopped onto the of her tower room. It seemed each room in the tower was split into 3 separate rooms with a small meeting area in the front. It was a convenient setup for every and anyone. Groaning, she tried to burrow as deep into the bed as possible. It had taken them a full day's run to reach the tower and get the speech from Iruka. That left them with 1 day to recuperate. And Kimiko needed some recuperating bad. "I swear, Akane. If Sakura had asked me if I was okay one more time, I was going to choke that bitch until her head popped off," she thought. Akane shook her head. "Don't be stupid, Kimiko. If you did that you'd have failed the test, you know. The bitch can get hers later." Kimiko just groaned again as she mentally relived the day before. The entire time Sakura had been throwing slightly worried glances at her. Asking if she was okay or if they needed to stop so she could rest. Normally that would have made her happy, but as of late Sakura has seemed less and less attractive and more annoying. To the point that she snapped at the pink-haired girl. Flashback. "Hey Naruto," Sakura started up for what had to have been the 1000th time. "Are you sure you're okay? We really can stop for a little while if you're tired. You don't have to." Abruptly stopping and spinning around, Kimiko grabbed the girl and shook her. "Will you shut the fuck up already? If I was tired or not okay or anything else I'd say something, wouldn't I? Do it, Kimiko. Do it. You know you want to. Punch that bitch in her face. Shut her up forever. Knock that damn forehead off her neck." Akane was growling out the words in Kimiko's mind. Sakura blinked and stepped away from her with wide eyes. I was just worried about you. No need to act like such an ass." Kimiko's mouth dropped open. "I'm being an ass, I'm an ass. You know what, fuck you, Sakura. When have you ever been worried about me before?" Sakura took another step back as Sasuke just stared unbelieving of the events occurring right in front of him. "You never have cared about me. All you care about is a fucking prick that doesn't even want your flat-chested ass. I used to really like you and now I can't wait to get away from you. You're so weak you're just gonna get killed if no one comes to help you in a real battle." Kimiko found that her breathing was somewhat labored as she glared at the stupefied girl in front of her. Akane was practically jumping as she was yelling. "Come on, Kimiko. Kill the stupid bitch. She just gonna die like you said, you know. Now just do everyone a favor and just kill the dumb whore. Snap her neck. Stomp some shape into her. Eat her. Do something for fuck's sake." Kimiko turned and left to get away from her team and to hide her shock at what Akane was saying. "Hey Akane. Are you alright in there?" Akane was silent as she continued to run. Flashback end. Kimiko sighed. "It wasn't like you were any help in stopping me. You were egging me on the whole time. I swear if you hadn't freaked me out slightly I would have listened to you. What was your problem anyways?" Akane smiled and laughed nervously. "You'll find out soon, Kimiko. In about 5 days you will completely understand what my problem is, you know. And I fear for those who piss you off when it finally begins. Why couldn't she be the type of girl that doesn't have them? Though it'll definitely funny to watch those bastards get theirs. For now drop a stupid hinge and get used to your new body. Work those legs and get some clothes so you don't look like some commonly used whore on the corner. I'm asleep now." She immediately cut her link to Kimiko and curled up on a patch of dried wood that was floating across the water. Groaning again, Kimiko rolled out of bed and swayed lightly on her feet as she stumbled towards the full-length mirror in her room and dropped the hinge to see what she looked like. Immediately her clothes fell to the ground around her ankles and shirt canopied out suddenly. Long red hair draped down her back to her butt and ended with silvered-colored tips. Interesting. Her eyes were no longer the bright blue they used to be, but were now a stormy gray on her much slender face. She gave her a glance and found that they didn't much interest her. They were slightly larger than Hinata's and were clearly visible through the shredded clothing. Not being that interested in them, she propped her hands on her smaller waist and tilted her head. What the hell am I supposed to do about clothes? Maybe I can steal some from Sakura that aren't pink. Nodding to herself, Kimiko snuck out of her room and into Sakura's, which was void of its occupant. After a long and messy search that left clothes everywhere, all she had found was a pair of panties with the price tag still on them and a towel to cover her chest since she threw away her tattered jumpsuit in her room. Kimiko checked the price tag as she walked out of Sakura's room and Team 7's area. She wastes this much on just a pair of underwear. This is what she spends her mission money on. With how much underwear she has, I could pay 5 months worth of my water bill with them. Shaking her head in disgust at the waste of money, she turned to find the bathing room she was told about and slammed into something solid, falling to her butt. Kimiko rubbed her forehead as she looked up accusingly at who she had bumped into. In front of her was a slightly unamused Ino who was rubbing her chest. "Hey, you should really watch where you are going," she said with annoyance. Kimiko stood and glared up at the blonde in front of her. "Maybe you're the one that needs to watch where you are going. I wasn't even walking yet, just turning around." The sound of her own voice made her jump slightly. It was soft but strong. Ino rolled her eyes at the shorter girl. "Yeah. I'm the one at fault here and you wait. Who are you? I haven't seen you once this entire exam and you look way too young to be a Chunin or Chunin. So what are you doing here?" Kimiko fish gaped for a moment. She hadn't thought of what to tell anyone she might run into about why she was here nor who she was. She desperately tried to grasp for an excuse. "Oh. Me? I just stay in here sometimes, you know. Yeah. I come out here and stay in this building to get away from my family. I didn't know the Chunin exams would be held in the forest. So I was already in here by the time it started and was told not to leave." Kimiko smiles at Ino and puffed out her chest. She felt proud of her on the fly lie. The blonde snorted and flipped her hair. "Yeah right. That still doesn't tell me who you are. And how'd you get through the forest of death on your own? This place is infested with evil crap." Kimiko shrugged and turned and began to leave. "It's my secret and I'm not telling you. Now leave me alone. I really feel the need for a good soak for some reason." "Hey, wait up. Where are you going?" She jogged to keep up with the fast-walking Kimiko. "Bathing," was all she said. "Me too. I'll walk with you then." Oh joy. Rolling her eyes, she just continued to walk. She took short but quick steps and felt her hair slightly bounce with each step. Ino had to lightly jog to keep up with a silver-tipped redhead. The bathing area wasn't very far from the rooms, so the two quickly appeared at the entrance to them. Kimiko started for the entrance to the men's bath. "Whoa. Hold on. What are you doing? You can't go in there." Ino grabbed Kimiko's hand to stop her. "Why not?" Kimiko asked her with a confused look on her face. The reason quickly dawned on her when Ino made a face. "Oh right, I'm used to being alone here, so I never really worried about which one I used." That could have ended badly. "Guess I owe Ino one for that damn." Puckering her lips, Ino just pulled her into the girls' bath. No one was in it, so Kimiko was relieved not to have to deal with the other girls. She quickly took off Sakura's panties and hopped into the warm bath as she tossed the towel to the side. She moved out to the far edge and sunk in up to her nose, sighing as she relaxed in the warmth of the water. "I wonder what I'm going to do about clothes. Sakura's won't fit around me. Why did a king make these things so damn big?" Kimiko closed her eyes as she let her mind wander. Not long after, she felt someone touch her back and jumped. Turning around, she found a naked Ino kneeling behind her with outstretched hands. Hi." Ino giggled lightly as she looked down at her. "My name's Ino. Ino Yamanaka. What is your name?" "Kimiko Uzumaki," she said after a brief pause, already formulating her next lie. It was quite hard to, with Ino's chest clearly on display in front of her. At first the blonde girl's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "Naruto, if you..." Kimiko lifted her hands and shook her head vigorously. "Oh. You're not Naruto. Then are you related to him or something?" Kimiko nodded as she moved slightly away from the blonde. "I'm his cousin. He doesn't know about me." Ino nodded and looked slightly down. "Why is that?" "I mean, wouldn't you like to have your cousin know about you?" Kimiko bit her lip and looked away. "To tell you the truth, my parents are dead." Ino gasped and put a hand up to her mouth. "Yeah. Our clan, it was destroyed and they sent me away at the cost of their lives for me to find Naruto's mom and live with her and him, but she was dead too when I got here and I didn't know what to do, so I hid in here." I've seen him but haven't had the nerve to approach him just yet. I mean, what am I supposed to say to him? She sniffled slightly at the end and turned away from Ino. Damn, I'm good, but where did that come from? A cane shifted uncomfortably in her sleep. Ino wrapped Kimiko in a surprise hug and held her close. It's okay. I don't think I could understand what you have deal with, but I understand that it must not be easy. She turned her around and looked her in the eye. Not only that, but no, you can count on me as a friend, Kimiko. Unsure of what to say, Kimiko nodded slowly. Ino nodded back at her and offered to wash her back. As her back was being washed, and she did her best to ignore the fact that she was alone with a naked female, a thought came to her. Hey Ino. What do you think of him as a ninja? Naruto, I mean. Well, I wouldn't say he's a good ninja, but really he's not all that bad either. He just needs to be a lot more serious. Pranks are fun and all, but there is more to life than jokes. Kimiko nodded and offered to return the favor of washing her back. Ino gratefully accepted. After the two were clean, they exited the bathing area and went their separate ways. Kimiko walked into her room and flopped down onto her bed. Even with a full day to do anything she wanted, she planned to just rest. On the way back she had found some wrappings and had wrapped her chest. Laying unfailingly on the bed, Kimiko slowly fell into a dreamless sleep. Too soon though, she was awakened by the banging on her door. Naruto, wake up. The Hokage has called everyone who passed the second exam now. After Hokage's speech, Kimiko was unsure of how she felt about this part of the exam. She understood why these exhibition matches had to be held, but it didn't mean she liked the idea of them. So far none of them have really done much for her. Sasuke's match had had its moments, but ultimately served her no purpose. She had already grilled Kakashi into telling her about his curse mark, so she wasn't surprised. Shino's match was somewhat of a letdown. From the very beginning his opponent stood no chance against him. That Kankuro character had been worth watching though. She had gotten a small understanding of his fighting style and how he used his puppets. A tired Akane had said he wasn't going to be much trouble. Now she was watching Ino and Sakura battle and found it to be a tad bit lacking on the side of skill on both sides. Though she still watched with as much intent as she had with the other matches. After Ino had made her opinion of Kimiko as she used to be, Kimiko had resolved to be much more serious about being a ninja and dealing with any situation. The two kunoichi charged each with ready blows that the other caught. Drawing each other close and then pushing apart, they launched shuriken at each other. The kunai collided and flew harmlessly away from them. Charging each other again, they punch each other hard in the face, sending them flying backwards. Ino rolled to her feet and glared at Sakura. There's no way you could be even with me. She yelled. The tired Sakura chuckled softly. Of course. How could I be even with someone who only worries about growing her hair long and looking pretty? The blonde clenched her teeth. You better stop disrespecting me. Shikamaru could be seen staring even more intently at the battle. Idiot, letting the trash talk get to you. I don't know what she's gonna do. He said. Joji frowned. I don't like this Ino. Getting red in the face, Ino grabs her ponytail and cuts through it. Holding it up she let out a growl. I don't need this. She said as she flung her away. The hair flew around the arena. I'm going to end this right now. I'll make I give up come out of your mouth. She took up a small stance and clamped her hands together. Her entire team came forward and looked at her with shock and disbelief. Hey, no way. Shikamaru grounded his teeth as she forced her hands in front of her in some sort of rectangle. I knew it, she's gonna do mind transfer. The Suma looked down at his student. That idiot. I can understand your desperation but that's useless. Sakura mocked. Ino just shrugged. We'll see about that. Mind transfer jutsu. A jutsu that by projecting your own spiritual energy at your opponent, you can take control of their body for a few minutes. Sakura smiled as she explained the jutsu. But that terrifying jutsu has an important weakness. First, that the projected spiritual energy flies at your opponent at a slow speed. Second, if you miss your target it takes a few minutes to return to you. During that time, your body will be no more than an inanimate doll. The arena was filled with silence. Hey Kakashi, Kimiko whispered, isn't that like a clan secret? I mean lots of Leaf Nin probably already know, but who knows what the others know. After a second, Kakashi nodded. If you look at it like that way then it is. A clan's techniques are supposed to be secret. Nodding, Kimiko looked back at the fight and grinned. Kakashi looked at her and stroked his chin slightly. He noticed something different about her and planned to find out after the matches had ended. Obviously a lot has happened during their time in the Forest of Death. All of them seemed changed. Ino glared at Sakura. So what? We won't know until I try. If you miss, it's over, you know that. Right. Sakura grinned as she started to dodge as Ino yelled out her technique, Shikamaru yelled at her stupidity, and Kimiko smiled even more. Momentarily the arena was silent again as both girls slumped forward slightly. Who is it? Shikamaru asked. Too bad. Sakura looked up and smiled. Ino. Ino's team sighed in defeat as Sakura glared triumphantly at Ino. It's over now. Sakura found she couldn't move and looked down at the ground in shock. You fell for it. Sakura. A line of chakra-filled hair lead up to Sakura holding her in place. I finally caught you. Ino looked up at Sakura with a sly grin as she stared at her in pure disbelief. Exactly, that was all an act to get you to fall into this trap. So? You can't move, can you? It's a special rope made of my hair and chakra. Sakura struggled to move around in vain as Ino called out her technique again. Too bad, Sakura. Ino said through Sakura. To be hit with that move, Sakura has lost. Kakashi said as he shook his head. Kimiko only nodded in understanding. Ino raised Sakura's hand and smiled. Sakura Haruno would like to. Ino hesitated as she suddenly felt the need to do more than what she was doing. Dropping her hand, she walked Sakura's body up to the top of the rails and looked down at the floor. Taking a deep breath, she slouched her body head first towards the ground. Everyone gasped as Ino cancels the jutsu at the last second and Kakashi caught Sakura in a flash. The proctor, Heiichakm, stepped forward. Due to outside cough interference, the winner of this match is Ino Yamanaka. Silence filled the room as no one was sure how to react to Ino's sudden decision. Suddenly clapping could be heard and everyone looked up at Kimiko. Ino smiled weakly at her while everyone stared confused and Kakashi glared at Kimiko. Sakura tried to do the same but felt way too drained to do anything. What? It was a good match. Kimiko said, looking at everyone like it was the most obvious thing in the world. No one said anything as Kakashi, Ino, and Sakura returned to the balcony. Kakashi gave her a look that spoke volumes. Kimiko just scoffed and rolled her eyes. Heiei coughed as he called out the next match. The fifth match. Temari vs Tenten. The match between these two kunoichi was much more interesting to Kimiko than the last. Though it was quite short, both girls were able to showcase a bit of their skills. Ultimately though, Tenten was a horrible match for Temari and was easily batted aside. Temari left her a beaten mess atop her battle fan by the end of the match. After the winner was announced, she unceremoniously launched the unconscious girl away from her. She'll definitely be a hard match-up, but she seems fun, Nakane. Of course. I know she can't be you know. Kimiko nodded. You sound better than you did yesterday. What do you think of the competition so far? Akane thought for a moment before answering. The Uchiha and Aburam will obviously be tough to fight and so will the sand girl we just watched. The Yamanaka and puppet user won't be a problem at all. The two watched as Shikamaru lazily knocked out the sound kunoichi he was fighting. Damn, he's a lazy genius. Kimiko watched as Shikamaru slouched and walked back to the railings with Kiba jumping down from them. Yes. Lazy, but still a genius. So still be careful of him too. Also they're calling you know. Kimiko started as Kakashi placed a hand on her shoulder. Naruto. You're up now. Glaring at it, Kimiko shrugged off his hand. She hopped over the rails and onto the arena floor. Kiba stood in front of her with a large grin on his face and his white puppy, Akamaru, on his head. What was up with you staring off into space, Naruto? Realizing that there was no way that you could ever beat me, I bet. Kimiko just leaned back slightly and looked at Akamaru. She felt sick thinking about it but knew what was going to do. Hey, don't ignore me, loser. You know what, I'm going to finish this fight all in one punch. Kimiko shrugged and took up a fighting stance. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and leaned forward. Show me how you have progressed, Naruto. Kurenai sneaks a glance over at Kakashi and smirks. She had no worry about who would win this match, believing Kimiko was no challenge for Kiba at all. Team 10 as a group leaned back and snorted as they immediately counted Naruto out, except Ino. She was unsure of why, but felt this match was not going to go the way most of the others thought it would. Sakura just glared daggers at her, hoping she would lose to Kiba. Begin. Heiei stepped aside as he started the match. Kiba immediately drops to all four and yells out, "Four legs jutsu." His hair becomes more wild as his nails sharpen and chakra leaks out from his body. Stay here, Akamaru. I got this, Kiba says before he disappears in a burst of speed. Kimiko's eyes widen as she is shocked by a sudden elbow to the stomach and sent flying backwards. She landed in a heap as Kiba laughed at her and began to walk away. Hey, Proctor. He's not waking up any time after that. As Kiba continued to laugh and everyone around shook their heads in not so very disappointed disappointment, Kimiko rolled to her feet and ran at Kiba. Akamaru barks a warning at Kiba, making him turn around just in time to receive a hard kick in the face from Kimiko. Eyes widen as Kiba flew back towards Akamaru, with Kimiko already charging after him. Recovering in midair, Kiba flipped around to face Kimiko to find her fist too close to his face to be dodged. Slamming her fist into him with all her might, she sent him flying into the arena wall. Akamaru ran to check on his partner, worried. You better not underestimate me, Kiba. I don't want to hurt too much. Kimiko glares intently down at a shocked and dazed Kiba as he tries to stand. Kakashi looked at Kimiko with slight surprise. He had seen her get serious many times before but never like the way she was now. Is that really Naruto? He seems like a completely different person now. Everyone else leaned forward with a newfound interest in the match. Kiba used a wall to help him stand as he wiped blood away from his mouth. He looked at Kimiko with cold intent as he straightened his stance. Obviously I need to step this up a notch and put a loser like you in your place. Let's go Akamaru. Reaching into his pouches, he runs at Kimiko as he takes out smoke bombs and tosses them. Kimiko covered her face to keep the smoke from going into it as she peeked around them to try and find Kiba. A punch to the back suddenly rocketed her forward onto her face. She stood and took up a defensive stance, trying to sense Kiba's presence without any success. Punches began connecting with her body from every direction, clogging her mind more and more with irritation with each and every blow that landed. Damn. Damn. Man. That bastard. Where is that fucking prick? She began throwing wild punches into the air hoping to make contact. Kimiko. Calm down and just get out of the smoke. Akane's yell cleared away Kimiko's irritation slightly as she sprinted out of the smoke, but was met with the flying form of Akamaru. She shook her arm widely as the dog clamped down onto her arm. I didn't want to do this, but he needs to get off. Before stumbling back into the smoke with Kiba, Kimiko raised her arm high and slammed it down fast. With a loud yelp Akamaru smacked against the floor, letting go of her arm in the process. Putting all her strength behind her foot, she made to kick the poor defenseless pup. Coming out of the smoke as fast as he possibly could, Kiba grabbed Akamaru protectively and took the hard kick to the ribs that sent him flying across the floor for his partner. Kiba panted and groaned as he rose to his knees. You alright there buddy? Akamaru barked sadly at Kiba, letting him know he was okay but worried about his friend. Kiba nodded and pointed accusingly at Kimiko. You Naruto, what the fuck is your problem? Kimiko rolled her eyes at the boy. If you don't want him getting hurt, then either protect him better or get that mangy mud out of my way. Gasped of surprise at her words filled the arena as she lifted her hands and shrugged. Either way, Kiba. You are not winning this match. Kiba and Akamaru growled at her with hate. I'll make you pay for what you did and make you eat your fucking words. Kiba reached into his pocket and threw a pill into Akamaru's mouth. The pup suddenly grew slightly and its fur turned red before hopping onto the back of Kiba's crouched floor. Human beast clone. Suddenly in a puff of smoke, an exact feral copy of Kiba appeared on his back and Akamaru's. Like my shadow clones but using Akamaru instead. That's kinda cool. Kimiko thought as the two charged at her in high speeds. I'm going to end this punk. Not wasting any time, Kiba and Akamaru lifted up after the ground and spun rapidly. Piercing fang. Kimiko's eyes widened and tried to dodge the two spirals by jumping out of their way, but was still hit by their sudden change of direction and flung back against the arena wall. Damn, that's a strong attack. My henge won't hold it up against that for long if I keep getting hit by that. A few more and I'll be a half-naked girl with no way out. The spiral spun in a circle above her before coming back down to strike. Jumping back, she tossed several kunai at them for them to only be batted aside as she was hit again. This time caught in between the two and receiving multiple cuts and bruises. Kimiko dropped on her back to the ground as Kiba and Akamaru stopped spinning and landed. Kiba was breathing heavily as he held his side. Where's all your big talk now, huh? Where is it? As she began to stand, Kiba ran at her and slammed his knee into her stomach, making her double over in pain and fall to her knees. He grinned down at Kimiko as she tried to catch her breath and hopped back to Akamaru. Any chance you had was lost when you hit Akamaru, so give up now or else. Shakily, she lifted her hand to flip the wild boy off. Kiba snorted. Can't say I didn't warn you. Piercing fang. Damn, she thought as she peeked up at the two spirals above her. They were slowly but surely picking up speed to finish the match with the next blow. Akane, what should I do? There was a brief pause as she waited for an answer. Kunai, was all that was said. Kunai? They'll get deflected again. If only I could. Her train of thought ended as the answer came to her. She took out 5 kunai as she came to her feet. Time seemed to slow as the two spirals began their descent. Everyone, even Kankuro and Tamari, leaned forward with anticipation. Knowing that what happens will decide the winner. As her opponents drew closer, Kimiko drew back her arms and launched the kunai at them. The projectiles soared through the skies at the head spiral and were going to collide with it before the second one, which had always been slightly slower, suddenly surged forward and cut across the first one, acting as a sudden shield when the kunai reached them. The kunai disappeared into the spiral as a loud yelp was heard and it swerved away, knocking the other one off course and balance, caused them both to crash into the ground on opposite sides of the arena. Everyone watched where the two had landed, waiting for the smoke to clear so that they could understand what happened. Kiba pulled himself out of a crater with one arm as the other was badly injured. He dragged his left leg behind as a trail of blood followed it. The boy grimaced in pain as he pulled himself across the floor over to where his partner had landed. Everyone watched in silence as he slowly made his way towards Akamaru. He reached the dog to get the shock of his life. Akamaru was in a puddle of his own blood as kunai with chakra outlining them stuck out of his side. Cuts were all over the poor puppy's body as it struggled to breath. Everyone could hear his faint whimpering like an echo in a long hallway. Akamaru tears slid down Kiba's face as he reached out with his good hand to stroke the dog's blood-matted fur. Akamaru. Height stepped forward and looked down at the boy and his dog with sadness. This was obviously going to be a crushing defeat that will haunt him for a long time. The winner of this match is Naruto Uzumaki. He declared as he signaled for the medical team. Dead silence filtered through the arena as slightly saddened Kimiko made her way back to stand by her teammates. She briefly stopped by Kurenai and bowed her head. "I'm sorry for what I had to do to your student in Akamaru, but it was the only way for me to win in the end." Kurenai shook her head. "No need to apologize for doing what you believed had to be done to win. Though for your sake, I hope Akamaru survives his wounds." Kimiko nodded. "As do I." She moved on to stand between Kakashi and Lee. Before either of the two could voice their opinions of the match, she sat down and leaned her forward against the railings. "I don't want to talk about the match. At least not at the moment." Lee made to comment still, but was stopped by a hand on the shoulder and a headshake from Guy. Kakashi nodded his understanding, and she mumbled her thanks in return before passing out. The last thing she heard was Hate's voice calling out the next match. "Will the combatants for match 8, Hinata Hyuga and Niji Hyuga, please come down?" Himiko was shaken awake by an irritated Ino. "Hey. Wake up already. The matches are over and the Hokage is going to speak again." She nodded and stood unsteadily before following Ino down to the arena floor. Everyone stood in a line with Ibiki, Anko, Hate, and Hokage in front of them. Hate stepped forward. "To all of you who won the rights to compete in the third round test, one of you is missing, but congratulations to you all." All the Chunin instructors and genin who didn't win stood on the balconies. All except Kakashi, who mysteriously left, but that bothered Kimiko little. "Ah well then, Hokage, if you would please." Yes, the Hokage took a step forward. "Now I'd like to start explaining the main test." Everyone became more serious with those words. "As I told you before, in the main event, your matches will be seen by everyone. Each of you will fight to represent the strength of your countries. I'd like you to show off all your power with no reserves. Which is why the finals will be held 1 month from now." Kimiko puckered her lips a bit. "We're not going to do it right here right now." A few of the others gave her surprised glances. "This break you can say will be for preparations," said the Hokage. "What does that mean?" Niji asked. "In other words, in addition to informing all the various country lords and shinobi leaders, this is the time needed to arrange for the gathering of the event, and this is also the preparation time for your examination students." "I don't understand what you're trying to say." Kankuro complained. "What does that mean?" The Hokage puffed smoke out of his pipe. "Basically, it's the preparation to get to know your enemy and yourself. It's the time period where you will calculate your chances of winning by analyzing the data you accumulated during the trial competition. The battles up to now had you fight as if you were in a real combat situation, with the assumption of fighting an unknown opponent. However, the final trial will not be like this. There are those who showed all that they can do already to their rivals, there are those who competed and were badly injured against a strong opponent. To make everything fair, the 1 month should be used by all of you to improve and advance your skills." The Hokage grinned as he saw the anxious faces before him. "I'd like to dismiss you now," but Kimiko could be heard groaning in exasperation. "There's something that has to be done for the finals before I can do that." Almost all of the genin groaned now, making Anko chuckle as she walked towards them with a box. "Well now, don't get so excited," the Hokage said, shaking his head. "There are pieces of paper inside of the box that Anko is holding, so each of you take one. I'll come around, so wait your turn." Anko said. "Only one now." Each of them reached in and took a slip of paper out and opened them to find numbers. Ibiki stepped forward with a clipboard and pen in hand. "Alright, you all took a piece. Now then, I'd like you to tell us the number on that paper in order from the left." "Osu. It's 8. Himiko. 1. Damari. 7. Kankuro. 5. Ara. 3. Shikamaru. 9. Niji. 2. Shino. 6. Ino. 10. Ibiki turned to the Hokage. "That would mean he's number 4. The Hokage nodded. "Alright, now I will reveal to you the final tournament." All the genin gasped. "That's what we drew numbers for," Shikamaru exclaimed. "Now Ibiki, show them the match arrangements." Yes, Ibiki flipped his clipboard so that the genin could see what he jotted down. It was a tournament bracket with their names next to their respective numbers. "Well then, you're free to start strategizing or resting as you like. With this I'll dismiss you, Al, but are there any final questions?" Shikamaru raised his hand. "Yes. Since it's a tournament, it would mean that there's only one winner, right? Which would mean that only one person can become a Chunin, doesn't it?" The Hokage cleared his throat. "No. That's not quite it. There will be judges including myself, Kazukiage, lords of various countries that will make mission request, and other ninja leaders who will be watching the final test." Throughout the tournament these judges will be evaluating your abilities. Those judged to have the necessary qualities of a Chunin will be able to become Chunin. Even if they lose in their first match. That means that it's a possibility that everyone here will become a Chunin. Temari asked, slightly shocked. Yes, but also the possibility that no one will become Chunin. To advance in the tournament means that you will have more chances to appeal to the judges. Did you understand, Shikamaru? Shikamaru mumbled and nodded. Well, thanks for all the effort you exerted for these trials. You're all dismissed until a month from now. The genin nodded their affirmation and began to leave for training and rest. Wait. Naruto, you stay and come with me. There is something we must discuss. Himiko turned and pouted as she walked over to the Hokage. Man, what could he want at a time like this? I need to start training and fast. Akane chuckled in her mind. Oh, you'll get to train in about 3 days' time, Kimiko. Cause the 3 days are going to rough on you, you know. Kimiko blinked owlishly as she tried to comprehend what Akane could possibly mean. What is it, old man? I have to start training. The Hokage chuckled. Not here, Naruto. He put a hand on her shoulder and in a puff of smoke they appeared in his office. He gestured for her to sit down as he sat behind his desk. As she sat down, Kimiko noticed that both Ibiki and Anko had followed them here. Their presence suddenly made her realize something was off and she didn't like the feeling it gave her. Right. Naruto, you know you can trust me, correct? Kimiko nodded as the hair on her neck stood on ends. This wasn't going anywhere good. Then I can trust you won't lie to me then, correct? Another nod. Then please tell me why is it you have a hinge up? Himiko, after a brief startled pause, rushed to deny that she was using one but was cut off by Anko. Don't try lying here, kid. Me and Ibiki were trained to see through stuff like this for prisoners trying to break out and the Hokage, well, he's the fucking Hokage. You gotta give us some credit for what we do here. We know that you're using a hinge, Naruto. We just need to understand why. Ibiki said with crossed arms. You didn't have one up during the written exam, nor did Anko notice one on you before you went into the forest of death. But from the moment you stepped into that tower to this very instant, you have been keeping one up the entire time. Why? Frantically looking between the three faces, Kimiko tried to think. Akane. I don't know what to do here. Help. Akane sighed and shook her head. I'm sorry, Kimiko, but I see no other way out of this but to tell them the truth, she said sadly. Glancing at each of them once more, Kimiko sighed in defeat before telling them all about the battle, his near-death experience, meeting Akane, which as Kimiko revealed Akane's gender kunoichis everywhere, felt a swell of pride, and her proposal, dropping the hinge as she did so. The three stared at the red-haired, silver-tipped girl before them in complete shock. Not one of them was sure as what to say to the girl. To let you know I don't think of myself as Naruto anymore. She said in a soft voice. Ibiki was the first to recover. Oh. Then what do you call yourself if not Naruto? Anko and the Hokage soon shook away their shock as well. She mumbled her name. What was that? I didn't quite hear you. Taking a deep breath, she looked them all in the eye. My name is Kimiko. Kimiko Uzumaki. The Hokage asked if and when did she plan to reveal herself. I was going to do it during the third exam. That way I wouldn't have much to worry about becoming a Chunin and all. Anko smiled at the sudden confidence in the girl's voice. What should we do with her, Hokage? She asked. The Hokage leaned back and stroked his chin. We need to add her to the kunoichi list and see how she matches up to the others in her rank. It's also obvious that she needs to be educated in the ways of a woman and the female body. Can I leave that to you, Anko, without you corrupting our new kunoichi? Smiling, Anko saluted her leader. Of course. With the help of Kurenai, I'll have her down with a full understanding of the female body in 3 days flat. Himiko turned her head sharply to the snake mistress. So you're the reason I'm going to have a rough 3 days. But how did she know? Blank expressions froze on Ibiki and the Hokage's face as Anko just smiled down at Kimiko. Rough 3 days. Why, whatever could the Kyuubi have meant by that? The young girl shrugged. I don't know. She just said it would last 3 days for me. Suddenly the smile on Anko's face froze into plastic as Ibiki sighed and the Hokage developed a look of horror. What? Was it something I said? Anko placed a comforting hand on Kimiko's shoulder. Your first lesson shall be the bane of all females. The period, unfortunately for you, Kimiko. It's a bitch. Huh? Himiko floated face down in the warm open-bathed hot springs of Konoha as she inwardly groaned at a small headache she had. The past 3 days had been nothing less than both mental and physical torture for her. Both Anko and Kurenai, who didn't understand why Kimiko knew nothing of her body, drilled information into her almost non-stop. Some of it was common sense once Kimiko really took a look at it. Others made no sense at all no matter how she looked at it. And thus far one thing haunts her mind and body somewhat. She got a full understanding of what Akane had meant about a rough 3 days and why Anko seemed so sorry for her. For 3 entire days, Kimiko was in pain almost every second of each day. the cramps making her slightly bend over as she walks. 5 times Anko had to save some poor man who decided to hit on the young irritable woman's explosive anger. It was nothing less of torture to deal with Anko's style of teaching when Kurenai was not around. Though the worst thing was the blood. The bleeding had come in the middle of the night and terrified the young women to the point of tears. It took both Anko shaking her physically and Akane shaking her mentally to calm down. Kamiko rubbed her stomach absent-mindedly and frowned as she floated about. I have to go through that shit every month. Damn. If nothing else kills me that will. She curled into a bowl and rolled around the water, careful not to go near the other women. Already having washed, she was now just enjoying the warmth of the hot springs. It was midday and she was feeling too drained to become active enough for her training just yet. Sooner or later today it would start. The past 3 days would have to be made up for with a lot of intense training. For a while the bath was great until a slight giggle could be heard. It was faint and didn't seem to register to any of the women in the spring as they continued to chatter amongst themselves joyfully. Kamiko on the other hand heard it quite clearly. The first time it arose she looked around to try and find it for it, only to be drowned out by a large group of women's laughter. The second time she hopped out of the water and walked around where she thought it may be coming from. Searching around the border between the men and women's side that she was near, Kamiko noticed something strange about the border. There were small holes littered in random places on it far away from each other. As she neared one the giggling arose again, and this time it came through quite clearly for her to hear. Kamiko stood frozen as she tried to figure out what to do. At her angel, she was able to see an eye greedily looking through the hole, but was blocked from its sight. Obviously some dirty pervert needed to taught a lesson. Jabbing something into his eye seemed to mean, and she had resolved not to change into her old body again unless she absolutely has to. Also she really didn't want to stay out of the water much longer, but there was no way she was letting whoever this was look at her body. Suddenly a thought hit her. Turning so that she was facing away from the border, Kamiko put her butt over the hole. The giggling man seemed to not be bothered by that at all. His giggling seemed to increase slightly. Sure that she had, Kamiko hopped forward and yelped, causing all the women to look in her direction. Protecting her butt with one hand and pointing accusingly at the border with the other, Kamiko screamed, "Someone just touched me." A few gasps were heard as many of the women's glares focused onto the border. Their eyes, like hawks, found the hole in the eye full of newfound fear in. The next moment a war cry was cried out as the women barreled to and amazingly hopping over the border. Kamiko watched with wide eyes as the women in bathing towels with an assortment of items as weapons chased down a man with spiky long hair, running like his life depended on it. For a moment she felt bad, but shook the feeling away and went to sink back into the water. There was a spot where the natural rock seemed warmer than the rest. Akane seemed to wait until the girl was at her most comfortable, with her back against the rocks and her body feeling as if it was receiving a soft massage, to speak up. "Kamiko. Come in here for a second will you? I believe it's time we talked about your training and what you'll be doing exactly. Not only that, but a few other things you know." Kamiko frowned. "But I just got really relaxed Akane. Come on. Give me like a few more minutes and I'll be in there." Hearing an immediate no, she groaned as she focused and slowly let herself fall inside. Kamiko opened her eyes and looked at Akane through the pillars between them. She was shocked to see a giant red fox with 9 tails and large purple eyes looking at her. What things?" she said slowly, trying to get used to the sight of Akane in her true form and the sound of her old voice again. She had forgotten that she would look and sound like her old self in her mindscape. Akane sighed and shrunk down into her human form. "Well, I believe it is time I told you about your mother. I did promise for after the second exam you know." Kamiko eagerly edges closer to Akane. "But first could you do us both a favor and change the look of this place? This is your mindscape, so you are all powerful in here. You can just imagine a much more comfortable place for us to be." Kamiko nodded slowly as she took in what Akane said and closed her eyes to begin to concentrate. For a moment, nothing happened, and then the entire world seemed to explode in a flash of bright colors. Akane covered her eyes to keep from being blinded, but when she finally looked she gasped in amazement. Kamiko opened her eyes and took in what she had made. The ground once covered in the murkiest of waters was now a lush green field of grass. The sky was no longer a pitch black, but a blue as bright and clear as any sky she had ever seen. Trees and hills littered the land in a random array, with a mountain rising high in the far-off distance. Small animals such as rabbits, squirrels, birds, and monkeys could be seen scurrying about the land and sky. The biggest animals were foxes and surprisingly a few wolves. "Do you like Akane?" The red-haired demoness nodded on the brink of tears. She was looking at a tree that was larger and wider than all the others right in the middle of everything. The base of it was fashioned into what seemed like a house just for her. "Never before has anything so lovely ever existed. I couldn't have ever asked you for more Kamiko. Thank you." The two hugged and sat down on the grass to continue enjoying the scenery. Akane scratched behind the ear of a kit that had approached her. Your mom was a wonderful woman named Kushina, Kimiko. The best friend anyone in this entire world could ask for. During the entire time I've known her, she was never one to abandon her comrades. Much like you, her friends meant the entire world to her. She loved ramen just like you do and even ate at the same place as you, Ichiraku Ramen, almost every day. The look of shock fell on Kimiko's face. Do you mean that they who my mother was all along? A small bit of betrayal entered her voice. Kane smiled slightly. The young one called AM probably doesn't remember your mother, but the old man most definitely would remember her. Was one of the few that knew that she was pregnant. There are maybe 4 people who really knew, the old ramen stand man who has always been kinder to you than anyone else, the Hokage himself, your mother's teammate and a clan leader of this village, and a really nice Uchiha woman you know. Kimiko's eyes shone with impatience for more information as she tried to figure out which clan leader could have been her mother's teammate. Kushina was a really loud person, but an even louder Kunoichi in terms of skills. She wasn't much into learning or using many jutsus outside of simple ones like the shadow clone, substitution, and transforming jutsus. All of her training went into her speed and kinjutsu you know. Kinjutsu? Kimiko asked confused. What is that? Akane waved her hand back and forth dismissively. Don't worry about that right now. You'll get to understand it once you start training. Speaking of, I believe it's time we talked about that you know. Kimiko nodded slightly disappointed that they were done talking about her mother. We'll get back to Kushina another time since there is so much to say about her. For now I need you to go buy these things for your training this afternoon. Kimiko slowly opened her eyes after hearing the list of things Akane needed her to get. They were simple things really. Seal-activated training weights, chakra paper, a special order of curved kunai, binds for her chest that were seal-activated weights as well, and a wooden sword. Clothing would have been on the list, but Uranai took care of that when she noticed Kimiko's complete lack of female attire. Nothing seemed to be really all that helpful in training other than the training weights. Kimiko didn't complain though. Just got up and left the hot springs to begin shopping. Finding the training weights were pretty easy since just about every ninja store sold them. Even the weighted bindings were easily found. Chakra paper was given to her for free since one of the owners got a good peek down Kimiko's shirt as she filled with her bra. Needless to say even though she got free stuff, she still left the guy with several missing and broken teeth. She was on her way to find a place to put in her kunai order when she ran into Ino when turning a corner. Quite literally again. This time however Ino was the one who ended up on her butt. Oh, I'm sorry Ino. Should have watched where I was going. Ino waves it off as Kimiko helps her stand. No, it was my fault. I've been walking into people every day since I found out the results of the 3rd exam for the Chunin exams. The blonde looked down with a sad expression as she filled with her hands. For a moment Kimiko was lost until she remembered who Ino's first round opponent would be. That's right. She has to fight Lazy Ass, her own teammate. Kimiko slung an arm around the girl's shoulder and pulled her close. Nah, I heard about that. It must be tough having to fight your own teammate after everything you guys have been through together. She smiled softly. Ino nodded and leaned slightly into her as tears formed in her eyes. I never thought I would have to fight either one of my 2 teammates. I thought we would always be able to back each other up, but now neither me nor Shika can back anyone, and Choji and Asuma are going to have to pick between us. Not only that, but there's no way I can win. Shika is fucking master of strategy. Fighting him is like fighting your own mistakes with the way he works. The 2 girls remember how Shikamaru gave the Sound Nin girl a false sense of security before she was knocked out. Kimiko started to walk with her arms still around Ino's shoulders. She was unsure of what to say to the girl who was now letting her tears of turmoil glide down her face. The 2 just walked in silence as Kimiko searched for a metal shop to place her order. It was about an hour later when she finally found one. Ino was still with her, yet neither girl had spoken a word to each other. The blonde had stopped crying and leaning on Kimiko and at some point wrapped her hand into Kimiko's. She turned to the silent blonde. Hold on a second okay? She whispered as if a loud noise could cause the tears to come back. I have to place this order in and we can go to your house and do stuff if you want. Ino smiled weakly and nodded. I would like that you know. You can stay the night too. Kimiko nodded and went in to place her order for the kunai. I hope that was okay with you Akane. It doesn't look like we'll be getting any training done. Akane smiled as she rolled about with a fox kit that seemed attached to her. It's okay Kimiko. Go and enjoy your time with your friend for tonight. You just need to use that chakra paper now you know. Kimiko nodded and did exactly as she was told after grabbing the paper. The paper suddenly made a sharp cut up the middle of it as one side dissolved into a moist nothingness and the other wrinkled slightly as the edges gained a fine layer of ice on them. Akane blinked in slight amazement. Well that is nothing short of amazing. You have a strong affinity for both wind and water element jutsus, a small affinity for lightning element jutsus, and though not well you should be able to use ice element jutsus as well you know. Himiko, not anywhere near 100% sure of what Akane had just said, filled out her order and left. She could expect it by tomorrow. Ino was outside patiently waiting for her. Well, now that that's done, how about we get something to eat? The blonde shook her head and smiled. I already ate. Maybe coming off the stupid diet I was on, but not trying to make myself fat. Kimiko covered her mouth as she giggled at the thought of a large Ino. It's not funny. She pouted until she began laughing with her. Kimiko grabbed the girl's hand and the two strode forward. So why don't you fill me in on the prelim matches, huh? I heard that some were really good matches. Ino immediately launched into an explanation of Kimiko's match. Believing the girl would want to know how cool her cousin was. During the walk, Kimiko learned about the 3 matches she slept through. She could barely contain her anger when Ino told her what Niji had done to the shy Hinata. The entire match had become pointless at one point, but still the boy fought to hurt the girl. Hinata, he will pay for what he did. I'm going to beat the living daylights out of that bastard. Ino was just starting the explanation of Gaara and Lee's match when they reached Yamanaka flower shop with said redhead glaring through the window. The tension build was sudden and fast. The boy wasn't even looking their way yet they felt completely uneasy. Kimiko was feeling the need to prepare to fight and Ino the need to flee and never look back. Seconds felt like years as they passed and no one moved. Eventually though, Gaara turned and walked away without once glancing in their direction, but they were sure he knew they were there. As sure as they were that they were happy he left. I thought that guy was going to attack the shop or something. Ino was shaking slightly as she quickly walked into her store. Her dad could be seen standing tensely behind the counter as he frowned out the window. He seemed just as prepped for a fight as Kimiko. Is everything alright, daddy? Inoichi frowns a second more and sighs as he relaxes. He smiles at his daughter. Yes, dear. Everything is just fine. Who is your friend? Kimiko smiles, steps forward, and slightly bows. Hello, my name is Kimiko. It is nice to meet you. Inoichi smiles and nods as he begins to arrange flowers around the corner. Kimiko turns to Ino and smiles nervously as she shifts around. So what is it you want to do? I have never been to another person's house before, so. Ino smiles and grabs the girl's hand. Don't worry about that. We're going to have fun no matter what. Promise. The two girls ran up the stairs to the small house above the flower shop. They walked into a small room that was decorated in purple. The rugs were a fluffy bright purple and the walls were an even brighter shade than them. The bed was covered in a dark purple sheet with an assortment of oddly shaped purple pillows. The only other color in the room were the pictures of Ino, her parents, and her teammates. Wow. Was all that Kimiko could muster at the monocolored room scheme. Yep. This is my home away from home. Ino was grinning widely as she opened up her arms. Home away from home? Yeah. I'm not allowed to decorate like this at the Yamanaka compound, so sometimes I'll stay here since it has my own personal touch, you know. Plain white and brown get boring after a while. Kimiko nodded her head in understanding. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the room as Ino sat on her bed and kicked off her shoes. Don't just stand there, silly. Come sit down with me. Kimiko sits next to Ino and begins to kick her legs. So tell me something about you. Like what? The blonde shrugged. I don't know. I've never heard of the Uzumaki clan. Maybe you can tell me a bit about it. Kimiko frowned and stopped kicking her legs. Or not. Kimiko shook her head and smiled. It's not that I don't want to. It's just I don't remember much about my clan life. I never got trained in our techniques or educated fully in our ways. Ino nodded and wrapped her arms around Kimiko. Kimiko hugged her back and the two sat unmoving for a long time. She was unsure where the fun that Ino promised was, but she liked the contact and comfort she felt from Ino. It was starting to make her feel bad for not telling the truth. Turning to look at the blonde girl, she found herself staring into two giant pale blue eyes. There was a second's hesitation in Ino's eyes, but the next thing Kimiko knew the two of them were kissing. Shock ran through her body as she tried to understand the situation, but soon found herself relaxing. She leaned into the kiss as Ino slowly pulled her closer. The two girls fell to their sides on the bed and wrapped their arms around each other even tighter. Ino broke the kiss and smiled down at a flustered Kimiko. She softly brushed her lips across the girl's cheek, tempting her to turn her head back into another kiss. This one much more heated than the one before it. Ino rolled on top of Kimiko and pushed her tongue deep into the other girl's mouth, exploring each and every inch of it eagerly. Her hands grabbed onto Kimiko's and gently massaged them, making her gasp and moan into the kiss. Kimiko was unsure what to do. What Ino's tongue was doing, what her hands were doing, they felt amazing and she was loving every second of it. She wanted more, so much more. Her own hands glided down Ino's sides and grabbed her ass, making the blonde squeal softly and giggle. Soon though Ino's hands glided down her stomach and along the edges of her panties. Gasping and bucking, Kimiko pushes Ino away when she presses down between her thighs. Breathing heavily, the two girls stared at each other. Ino with a look of complete surprise and bewilderment, and Kimiko a look of confusion, panic, and slight fear. Kimiko she fixed her disheveled clothes quickly and rushed past Ino out of the room. Again Ino called her name, but she ignored it and continued to run. Annoyed she looked up into to see her flew out of the door with Ino trailing behind her. Kimiko ran like her life depended on it. Not risking to look back at all. Once more Ino screamed out her name. The tears were evident at her choked yell, but still Kimiko ran. Kimiko sat in the trees of the forest that separated the Inyazuka compound and the Aburam compound. She was clutching her chest like her heart was threatening to tear its way out of it. The young girl looked down into the village and wondered what she should do next. She had asked Akane but was given the same answer over and over again. Akane had no answers. Tears edged her eyes and she swiped at them angrily. Many people had tried to stop her running out of concern for the young girl, but she didn't know that. At the time she felt and saw those hands as nothing more than long tendrils of uncertainty and evil, trying to pull her down. Now they were all that and more in her mind, as she tried to figure out what had happened between her and Ino. Akane she began for what must have been the 100th time, but Akane cut her off sadly before she could finish. I'm sorry but I don't and won't have an answer for you Kimiko. I wish I did but I have no idea how to handle this. This is what a real parent figure is for. Oh Kushi, I have no idea how to help her. Standing, Kimiko let hot angry tears flow freely down her face and began to jump through the Inyazuka compound. Her mind was racing like mad now. Ino is a girl. I am a girl now. Both of us are girls. She likes Sasuke, a boy. I don't like boys at all. Ino kissed me she touched me. Why did she kiss me? Why did she touch me? Damn you Ino. Damn you I'm so confused now. Closing her eyes tightly, Kimiko tried to squeeze away her tears in vain. They continued to flow like a river to the ocean. She continued to run until she found herself near the Inyazuka's personal hospital. Kimiko looked at it and wondered if Kiba might be in there with Akamaru. Remembering how the match ended, Kimiko quickly transformed into her old self and walked into the hospital. It looked much like any other hospital would. White was the dominant color throughout the entire area, with the chairs and rugs being a light shade of blue. The waiting area wasn't very large. Just 7 chairs along the sides of the wall with a single rug between them. Pictures of many dog breeds lined the wall, and there was a desk about as long as a grown man with a man sitting at it filing through papers. Kimiko walked up to the man and slapped her hands onto the desk to grab his attention. Hey. What room is Akamaru in? I want to check on the little guy. At first the man was glaring at Kimiko in annoyance for scattering his papers all over his floor and the desk, then his facial expression softened a bit. Akamaru. Poor pup is in the 13th room down that hallway on your left. Kimiko jerked slightly at the man calling Akamaru poor pup, she looked down the hall he pointed at. Is he okay? The man just smiled sadly and went back to work. After a moment of hesitation, she slowly walked to Akamaru's room. Many thoughts filtered in and out of her mind as possibilities filled it. So little could be wrong with Akamaru that she might be stressing herself for no reason whatsoever. On the other hand, Akamaru could be in the worst condition possible after their match. It was obvious which of those two thoughts had the dominant hold on her mind as her mood steadily dropped even lower. By the time she was standing in front of the door, she felt worse than she ever had before. Taking a shallow breath she walked into the room. When the door opened a strong silence was present. The room was completely white like the rest of the hospital, with diagrams of the canine anatomy lining the walls. Akamaru was on a high bed that was right next to the window. The pup was as still as the day was fresh. His white fur looked roughed and bristled with needles sticking out of almost every part of him. A small respirator was strapped to his muzzle and his eyes were lightly bandaged. Kiba's head was resting next to the pup's. He was snoring softly as tears leaked out of his eyes bit by bit. One of his arms sat under his head as a pillow, while the other one hugged uselessly just above his lap tightly bandaged. Kimiko took a step in and the door swung shut behind her. She quickly spun around to find a woman with feral brown hair blocking her way out. The woman wore a pair of standard black kimochi pants with a Chunin flak jacket. The Inyazuka clan markings could be seen on her cheeks and slightly along her eyes. Her eyes were a sharp brown and mouth was curled into small scowl. Kimiko took a step back feeling threatened until she felt a presence behind her and whirled around to find a large blue-gray dog. It was missing its left ear and an eye patch covered its right eye. The canine was lightly growling at her. What are you doing here Uzumaki? The wild-haired woman demanded. What business do you have with my son? I just came to check on Akamaru is all, Kimiko said as she glanced nervously around. I didn't think I would run into Kiba's mother. Wanted to know how he was after our match. The large dog circled in front of her. That is very kind of you, but I don't think that you should have come here at all. Though you are here now. Kimiko's eyes widened and she fish-gaped momentarily. The large canine sighed. Yes, I can talk. My name is Kuramaru and I am Tsume's here partner. Kimiko slowly nodded deciding to just accept it for now. She looked at Tsume, Kiba's mother, and swallowed. How is Akamaru then? Tsume crossed her arms and glared at Kimiko. The pup is in pretty bad condition at the moment. He can't walk and can barely breathe on his own. What you did to him. Kimiko lowered her eyes in same. Tsume softened her glare and smiled slightly. But he's expected to make a full recovery sometime after the Chunin exams are finished. The young girl's eyes flew up in amazement and she launched herself at the woman in front of her. It was such a tight hug. As if she was trying to kill Tsume in a death hug of joy. She was smiling madly, she was so happy. An elbow came crashing down onto her head. Making her lose her grip on the clan leader's waist and fall to her knees, clutching the top of her head. Kuramaru shook his head as Tsume laughed at the girl. You seem to have a good amount of energy to you, pup. I'd like to see you put all that energy into your training for next month. Kimiko looked up, still holding her head, and grinned. Of course. Tsume's smile faltered for a moment and she sniffed the air. A wild smile see across her face. You know, everyone in this village has a certain scent to them. One that helps us fully trained Inyazukas tell you apart even with our eyes closed. Kimiko nodded even though she didn't understand what was being said. You smell of ramen and foxes for obvious reasons. But now you have a lavender scent on you. All over you actually. I wonder if Inoichi knows what you have been up to with his daughter. Kimiko stared blankly at the clan leader for a moment until it finally hit her. Inoichi was Ino's dad. Ino always smelled a bit like lavender to her. WH what? No. Me and Ino haven't done anything like that. She slightly lied while blushing madly. I haven't even talked to that loud-mouthed girl. Kuramaru's sweat dropped. Yeah, she's the loud-mouthed one. Tsume laughs and pats Kimiko roughly on the back. It's okay, pup. No need to act so shy about it all. Just make sure you and that girl aren't making more pups. Eyes widening in horror, Kimiko jumped out of an open window and ran away. Tsume laughed wildly and woke a tired Kiba. Mom. What are you doing here? Stifling her laughter, Tsume began to leave. Just checking in on my own. Come home for dinner. Hana might get mad if you don't. With that she and Kuramaru left chuckling. That boy girl now, she said, acts just like his mother did with Minato. She acts just like her mother period. After a moment of laughter, the pranks she had been hit with over the past 10 years suddenly rushed to mind. The next day Kimiko could be found standing in the middle of training ground 9 in the middle of 20 of her shadow clones. She was breathing heavily as she looked around her. Each weight on her legs were 100 pounds and each arm weight was 90 pounds. The binding weight on her chest was half that of her arms and making it hard to breathe. For the past hour she had been fighting off wave after wave after wave of her clones as part of her strength and endurance training. She was on her 13th and final wave when Akane told her to stop. That's enough, Kimiko. It is time for you to start on both of your elements training. Kimiko sighed and dispelled all of her clones. We're going to do this now, Akane. When I barely have any chakra left. Of course we are. If you can do it low on chakra, then you can make really powerful jutsus when you have all of it. Now make 61 clones and have 31 of them grab a leaf and apply chakra to it to try and cut it. Kimiko groaned as she did as she was told. The clones immediately went to work. Now you and the rest of your clones grab a leaf as well and use chakra to try and pull all of the water out of it. Kimiko nodded and for the next 6 hours of the day, she trained until all her clones dispelled from exhaustion. She stood in the middle of the field holding 2 leaves as she concentrated on the one in her left until water began to slowly drip out of it, then the leaf in her right hand until it sliced in half. Kimiko jumped into the air cheering triumphantly at her success. Woohoo. I did it. I cut the leaf. Yes you did, Akane chuckled, slightly amazed at how fast she had succeeded in her training. But you couldn't get much water out of the other leaf it seems. Your affinity for air is obviously more potent than your affinity for water. You already completed the first step of the air training. Kimiko left the training field with a slightly tuned down smile. Yeah, but that doesn't matter, right? What matters is I can do it. I can actually do it and I completed a part of my training. I'm so much closer now. She whooped triumphantly again as she made her way to the Ichiraku ramen stand. Akane laughed at the girl's enthusiasm. I could tell her why she got it down so fast, but she seems happy. Best not to mess with her happiness while she's like this. Kimiko ran all the way to the ramen stand practically drooling with success and hunger. Flying and throw the flaps and plopping down into a chair with even more enthusiasm, she banged on the countertop while grinning. I need 17 bowls of miso ramen here fast as you can get to me. At first a brown-haired teen behind the counter was quite irritated with the girls pounding on her counter, but when she heard the order she gasped. Are you sure you want that many bowls? I mean that much ramen is a bit much, don't you think? The girl had never seen anyone ask for let alone eat that much ramen before other than Naruto. Unless the person was Akamichi, but whoever this girl was in front of her sure wasn't one of that clan. Kimiko was a little put off by the girl's reaction to her order until she remembered that she didn't know who she was. I forgot all about AM and old man Tucci. Is it okay to tell them, or she shook off the thought, still not ready to reveal her identity to anyone who didn't already know. The 3 that did, well 5 now, was enough for her right now. Yeah, I'm sure, she slightly chuckled. I mean, I'm a growing kunoichi who is going to be the greatest of them all. You'll see. AM smiled at Kimiko, feeling reminded of Naruto. Alright then, if you insist, but fair warning. When all that ramen goes to your butt and waist, don't come crying to me. The brown-haired girl went into the back to tell her father Kimiko's order. Kimiko could clearly hear Tucci ecstatically cheer, for his prayers had been answered. AM walked back and laughing cheerfully. So my name is AM. What is your name? The name's is Kimiko. Nice to meet you, AM. Kimiko replied. AM nodded. Kimiko. That's a really nice name. I like it. So where are you from? I've never seen you around this village before, and with hair like yours, you'd think I'd have seen you at least once. Oh, I'm a new kunoichi, you see. I came from my clan far away from here after it was taken out. Talked to the the Hokage, and he asked me if I wanted to be a kunoichi for the village. I always wanted to be one, so I agreed, and here I am 3 days later. Wow. AM put a hand to her chest as her father brought out the first 3 bowls of ramen for Kimiko. Your clan was wiped out. Like everyone in it but you? Tucci looked at Kimiko with a startled and slightly saddened expression when she nodded. Well, that must really be hard on you. To be the only one left of your entire clan is a hard thing to have to deal with. Kimiko nodded slowly and began inhale the ramen in front of her. I try not to think about it much, really. It's easier that way, you know. She shrugged slightly and continued to inhale her food. AM nodded as her father looked Kimiko up and down. I understand that, but if you don't mind my asking, what clan do you belong to? Most clans share a physical appearance within themselves. I've never seen anyone who looks anything like you before. Kimiko choked slightly on her ramen. She wasn't sure it was a good idea to tell them her last name. Tucci though saw it as her not taking the question very well emotionally. That's alright. You don't have to tell me if you don't feel up to it. Kimiko nodded and after a moment's thought continued to eat. Kimiko walked home rubbing her belly in content. After Tucci apologized for his questioning of her, he halved the price of the ramen and sped up his service. Now full, all Kimiko could think about was lying down in her oddly comfortable couch and sleep. But a member of the Anbu had other plans for her. Appearing out of the shadows, the person fell in a crouching position next to Kimiko. Lord Hokage has requested your presence on the roof of the Hokage's tower immediately. Kimiko sighed and nodded. Understood, thank you, cat, she replied using the Anbu's mask as the person's identity before hopping across the top of the buildings to the Hokage's tower. When she arrived on the roof, she found the Hokage with Sakura standing next to him on his left. The cat Anbu landed on his other side slightly behind them. Ah, Kimiko. Good, you didn't make us wait. I need to see what your level of strength is, so I will have you fight young Sakura here so we can see where you are. Me and Kat will judge how well you do. She knows the other reason why this must be done. Kimiko looked at Kat, who in turn nodded at her. Okay then, let's start then. Wait. My name is Sakura Haruno. What is your name? Sakura walked over to Kimiko and held out her hand. After a moment of looking at her hand, Kimiko scowled. You heard the Hokage say my name, and I heard him say yours. There's no need for any more talking at all. Sakura gasped and stepped back shocked. Kimiko. Are you sure you want to act that way towards her? This is a chance to rebuild your relationship with everyone. Including this pink bitch here. Kimiko mentally shook her head as she took up a fighting position. She glared at Sakura like she was an enemy. With the others, maybe you're right, Akane. But Sakura, you said so yourself. That girl's just a bitch. Akane sighed. Sakura glared back at Kimiko and took up a fighting position of her own. I don't know what your problem is, but I'm going to give you a lesson in respect. A tick mark appeared on Kimiko's head as she gritted her teeth and waited for the battle to begin. The Hokage sighed as he could see that there would never be a possible friendship between the two girls. Sakura ruined that long ago without even knowing it. The best he could hope for was that they worked well on missions together if ever needed. Raising his hand he said, do your best not to harm each other. Now begin. Sakura immediately went to grab a few kunai but was stopped short by a heavy kick to her side. She flew back slightly but landed on her and moved to block Kimiko's next attack. As her hands flew up in defense, Sakura blocked a barrage of sharp punches. Kimiko was quickly driving the pink-haired girl back and keeping her on the defensive, leaving no opportunity for any counterattack to be launched. Some people would get irritated with Sakura's constant blocking. Kimiko on the other hand was happy. She eventually jumped away from the girl and launched several kunai at her legs. Sakura jumped and dodged them, but another heavy kick slammed into her side, nearly knocking her off the building as she slammed into one of the large stone pillars. Sakura gasped and fell to the as she looked at a clone of Kimiko that was standing over. Kimiko herself slowly approached the girl. Thinking fast, Sakura wildly threw several kunai and shuriken, dispelling the clone and forcing Kimiko back. Kimiko's opponent continued to launch off the projectiles as she ran to her. When she was close enough, the girl tried to punch her, but Kimiko ducked and spun around, sending a hard kick up to the girl's jaw while simultaneously making a clone that jumped up and kicked her across the face. Sakura fell to the ground and rolled away. She felt numb as she stood up. Everything was heavy and she was barely standing. She looked at a grinning Kimiko, breathing heavily. The pink-haired girl knew that she was severely outmatched. Kimiko could see it in her eyes. Nodding to herself, she created another clone, and with the other one, the three of them spread out and circled her. Panic showed in Sakura's eyes. Her last 3-on-1 battle hadn't gone so well, and she wasn't beaten like she was now. Blocking all those punches had sapped the energy from her arms. There was nothing she could do about the onslaught that she felt coming. And come it did. In burst of speed, too fast for Sakura to see, the three charged her one by one. Non-stop they ran at her. Punching her in the stomach and face. Kicking her in the back just to be kicked again in the stomach and again in the side. Occasionally a sharp pain on her body would appear and blood would flow from a new cut on her body. They were slicing her with kunai. Kimiko and her clones attacked the poor girl endlessly. Not relenting at all. Barely a second was passing between each attack, making it impossible for the girl to block even if she could. Seeing that Sakura was barely on her feet anymore, Kimiko went her two clones too at the girl. They ducked two weakly thrown kunai and kicked the girl in the jaw, launching her high into the sky to receive a ferocious knee to the stomach from the real Kimiko who had jumped up to meet her. Sakura coughed up blood just before being hit by Kimiko's follow-up kick to the face. Sakura flew back over the edge of the building and began to fall. "Cat!" The Hokage called out, sending the Anbu into action. Jumping over the rails and catching the pink-haired girl just before she hit the ground. Cat hopped back on top of the Hokage's tower and set the now bloodied and unconscious girl down softly onto the ground. The Hokage lifted a hand and another Anbu member, this one wearing a rat mask, appeared, grabbed the girl, and left with her. Kimiko guessed the Anbu must be taking her to the hospital as she dispelled her clones. She walked over and stood in front of the Hokage and Cat Anbu. Shaking his head, the Hokage sighed, making Kimiko and Akane worry. "Well, unfortunately you couldn't keep from hurting the girl it seems, but that is not what I am judging on." Kimiko let out a soft sigh and smiled widely. "Now, I must say I am very impressed with all of your improvements. Your Taijutsu has most obviously increased. The speed and control at which you move is much higher than I have ever seen it before. I'm unsure of how much power you have, but you definitely can be quite deadly with your Taijutsu alone. I haven't seen much of your ninjutsu other than your clones, but I didn't expect much there." "Hey!" Kimiko cried out indignantly, making the Hokage give her a questioning look. "It's not like I'm no good at ninjutsu, I just haven't had the time to learn any. Akane said she will teach me a few soon once I've mastered my elements." "Your elements?" The Hokage questioned surprised. "You know what they are?" Kimiko nodded and leaned back nonchalantly. "Yep, I have wind, water, and a bit of ice if I train really hard. I already completed the first part of my air element training today." The Hokage rubbed his chin thoughtful and waved the Cat Anbu forward. "Cat, please take off your mask." The Anbu took off the mask to reveal a woman with long purple hair and light brown lips were a slight purple, and she smiled at Kimiko who marveled at her beauty. "This is Yugao Yuzuki. From this day forward she is going to be one of your teachers for the Chunin exams." Yugao walked over to Kimiko and held out her hand. "It is nice to meet you, Kimiko. To let you know, I have never had anything against you and will do my best to assist you. As long as you don't screw up, that is." Though the ending sort of killed the kindness of her gesture, Kimiko was somewhat touched by Yugao's words and shook her hand. "Wait," Kimiko said after a moment's pause. "You said one of my teachers. Who is my other one?" "He is one of my students. My best if you have to really look at it. I am sure you will meet him very soon. He appears when he feels like it, much like Kakashi. You'll know the pervert when you see him." For a reason she was unable to understand, Kimiko had a vision of the man from earlier at the springs. That couldn't have been him. That guy was way too lame to be trained by a Hokage. "Kimiko, I want you to meet me at training ground 15 tomorrow morning at 11. Don't be late," Yugao said before leaving. The Hokage wished Kimiko good luck and also left. Kimiko stretched and leapt away towards her home. "Now, I can finally sleep." Kimiko sat next to a small pond that seemingly had no bottom and frowned down into it. She dragged the tips of her fingers slowly across the top of the water. Small ripples followed the trail that her fingers were leaving as she thought of her recent encounter not too long ago. Kimiko walked around the village of anything to fill her time for the next few hours until it was time for her to meet Yugao at the training field. The market street was unusually full for this time of day and all of the stores seemed to be filled with people from just about every village that she could think of. They were mostly civilians, but there were some ninja to be seen among them. They must be escorts or just here to watch and cheer during the finals. Though I don't understand why any ninja from the Hidden Grass village would be here, since none of those guys even made it past the first part of the second exam. Also, what are Hidden Miss Ninja doing here? They are most likely here to scout what you all have in terms of strength so that they can have information on you for future references, you know. And those Miss Ninja are probably doing the same, Akane mushed as she rolled around in a field of flowers with a small fox kit that never leaves her side. Other, more mature foxes lounged around them. I've never understood why you humans even have a tournament like where just anybody who has the right papers can just show up and see what's happening. Kamiko nodded in agreement as she walked into a store that sold home decorations. There was an assortment of items on the shelves, floor and walls. Frames with regular borders sat on the shelves next to little marble people and animals. Lamps of all sorts stood along the walls, and fancy curtains were draped on the walls. Alongside them more frames with borders that were more fancily decorated than the ones that were on the shelves. They were also much larger than them as well. Many other things were there, but those things were there in abundance. After a long debate with Akane the night before, the two had decided that the apartment they were in was simply way too dull to call a home. They thought it best to fix the place up with decorations and possibly paint later if Kamiko had the time. Nothing seemed to draw her interest, but she knew that stuff like decoration finding would take time. Why she knew this, Kamiko had no idea whatsoever. She was looking a small round table that, unlike the one she has at home, was completely polished and dent-free when she heard her name. Kamiko. She froze as she immediately recognized the voice that was close behind her. Turning around, Kamiko found herself face to face with Ino again. Ino smiled weakly at her. Hi. Kamiko bit and chewed on her bottom lip slightly. How did you know it was me? I wasn't facing you or anything. Ino shifted slightly. Well, there is no one else who has hair like you do in this village. You're the only girl I know that has hair to her I mean is that long. A slight blush crossed her face as she looked down. Kamiko nodded and thought about possibly cutting and dyeing her hair, but a growl of anger from Akane stopped that thought. I see then, she said. Her gaze drifted towards the exit of the shop. Nowhere near ready to actually talk to Ino yet, she was ready to flee. Ino noticed her this and quickly grabbed her arm. Can you come with me for a bit? I really need to talk to you, please. Kamiko wanted to rip her arm out Ino's grasp and run. But she knew Ino was going to just chase her down again. She didn't want Ino to cry again either. Sighing, Kamiko nodded and let Ino lead her out of the store. The two walked through the streets with seemingly no destination in mind. Turning corners at random times and occasionally taking to the roofs to move faster. After a while of running the two reached an open field of grass. Ino stopped running and sat down on a tree stump that was just there. There was another one close to Kamiko, but she opted to stand instead. Ino fiddled with her fingers as she stared at the ground. She felt the need to talk to Kamiko, but was unsure what to say to her. The platinum blonde took a few breaths before turning around to stare her dead in the eye. Then she suddenly threw herself forward onto her knees. Placing her hands on either side of her, Ino forced her eyes closed and forehead to the ground. Kamiko. Please forgive me. Kamiko took a surprised step back. What? Ino kept her head forced down. I didn't mean overstep any boundaries between us. I just thought that with the way you had held me that maybe it was okay. That you would go along with it. She slowly looked up at Kamiko with fresh, unshed tears in her eyes. I know we haven't even known each other that long, but I don't want to mess up our friendship because of this. So please forgive me for my stupidity. Kamiko stared at the girl before her shocked into silence. She still was unsure of the entire situation with Ino, and this wasn't making any better in her mind. But she could see how Ino was feeling just by looking in her eyes. The girl was so truly afraid of losing her new friend so early in their relationship that she was willing to prostrate herself in shame in front of her. Biting her bottom lip, she looked away from Ino. Akane, sorry, but I can't help you no. Akane replied sadly. Kamiko sighed and looked back at the patiently waiting Ino. I don't get it, Ino. You like that freaking Uchiha bastard. Why would you even? I don't. Ino interrupted. Kamiko's eyes widened to the point her eyebrows disappeared behind the small bangs of her hair. Wait, what? I don't like Sasuke. It's just that is what every other girl was doing, so I thought it was what I was supposed to be doing too. Though I never actually liked him, I did what all the other girls did. Truth is I never liked a boy in my entire life. I've always liked girls really. Kamiko's mouth dropped at Ino's confession. After a moment's thought, she made a slightly audible gulping sound. So you like me? Ino blushes and nods her head. Kamiko looked down and thought of everything she knew of the girl in front of her and how in an instant all of that meant nothing. This girl was a complete stranger to her. I'm sorry, but Ino cut her off again by suddenly hopping up and waving her hands around. Oh no. That's okay. I mean, I never even took into account if you even liked other girls, let alone liked me back, so don't worry about. But we can still be friends, right? Smiling, Ino held out her hand. Kimiko took and nodded while smiling sadly at the girl. Well, I should be going now. Bye. Ino ran away before Kimiko could say anything to her. Kimiko sighed as she flopped onto her back. She covered her eyes and thought about Ino. Even from the back, Kimiko could see the tears falling down the girl's face. It made her feel as though she shouldn't be around Ino anymore if that's all she is going to make her do. You look comfortable. Sucking in air, Kimiko stopped herself from screaming out in surprise. Next to her, Yugao was standing over her with an amused grin. I wish I could be that relaxed when I know I have my career as a ninja on the line in just a little under a month. Kimiko immediately hopped up and waved her hands before her widely. What? No. I'm not comfortable at all. I was just resting to keep all my energy. Yugao laughed and leaned back against a tree. So you said you finished the first part of your wind training, but you're struggling with your water training, correct? Show me how far you are. Nodding, Kimiko grabbed 2 leaves and cupped one in each of her hands. Focusing her chakra into them, the leaf in her right hand immediately split in half, while the one in her left gave off droplets of water. A small portion of its middle became a crunchy brown. I just can't seem to get a hang of taking the water out of the leaf at all. The frown of disappointment was plain on her face until she looked up at a stunned Yugao. You do know that you are supposed to use both of your hands to do either of the 2 things you just did, and not only that, but that isn't the first step to water training. It is the second. Kimiko's eyes widened as she stared down at the leaves in her hand. You said I had to do them with one hand. The cane grumbled into the ground of the flower field she was in again. I never said that. I just told you what to do, you know. It was you that decided to use one hand to do all of this. I just didn't feel the need to tell you with you making so much progress. Kimiko thought for a moment but couldn't find anything to say, so she just shrugged it off. So if this is the second step, she said holding up the leaf in her left hand, then what is the first step? Yugao tilted her head and thought for a moment. You have to pull water towards you with your chakra, I believe. She turned and pointed at the pond. Try and get some of the water in that pond to come to your hand from where you are standing now. Kimiko nodded and concentrated on the pond with her hands out. A few seconds without any results passed before water slowly rose from the pond and came to circle around Kimiko's hand. She smiled widely and tried even harder. More water rushed up towards her and began to spiral around her widely. That's enough, Kimiko. She let the water drop. You have a good hold on your control of your water affinity, obviously. You just need to relax more when you try to pull the water out of the leaf. Just like you were when you were pulling the water out of the pond. Kimiko nodded and went to grab another leaf when Yugao stopped her. What are you doing? I'm going to train. Kimiko replied questionably while confused. Yugao smiled down at the girl. Well, that is nice and all, but I haven't told you what we are going to do now, have I? Kimiko dropped her hand. Now your other teacher will be the one teaching you ninjutsu. I on the other hand will be teaching you how to use a sword. A sword? Why would you think I need training in that? I've never picked up a sword before in my life. Well, you have great footwork from what I was able to see from your fight with Miss Haruno, and the way you used your clones tell me that you would be quite deadly with a sword. Also, I see a potential in you I have never seen in anyone else. Yugao looked at Kimiko seriously. Potential like what I see in you shouldn't be wasted. It's the biggest reason for me teaching you. Kimiko nodded and stood slightly more erect in front of her teacher. And what are we going to do first? Pulling out a wooden sword from only God knows where and handed it to her. She showed her the proper stance for her feet and how to hold her weapon before speaking. For now we are going to just swing the sword. That may sound lame and boring simply because it is, but it will be worth the exercise so that you know how to swing it properly. Now bring it over your head and back down as fast as you can until I say stop. For the next hour, Kimiko did as she was told until the wooden sword gained a blue ring at its tip. She almost dropped the fake weapon when it suddenly became much heavier. Ah. What the hell? Yugao grinned at Kimiko from the spot she was in above her. That's a seal I have put on any and all of my training swords. Every hour, as long as it is still being swung, one of them will activate and make them twice as heavy as before. Kimiko's jaw dropped as she stared at the wooden sword as it would attack her. How many of these are there? Seals? Just 3. I had 2 removed though, so that we have time for the rest of your training today. Sighing and crying in tears, Kimiko went back to swinging the sword for the next 4 hours. At the end of each hour, her swings became slower and required more effort to bring the weapon up and stop its downward descent. The entire time she was swinging though, she thought of Ino. Hey Kane, I know you said you can't really help me when it comes to Ino, but there's no one else I can talk to about this. The Kane was cleaning of the remains of a small rabbit she thought would taste delicious and decided that maybe she could help Kimiko in some way. How different can this be from Kushina's feelings for Minato anyways? I understand Maiko, but you do realize anything I tell you might not be completely accurate, you know. Kamiko sighed, but smiled when Yugao gave her a questioning look. I know that, Akane. Just tell me what you can, okay? Polite then. What should I do about Ino then? Straight into it, I see. Well, what do you think you should do? You know the girl likes you, and you know that she isn't a bitch like pink-haired girl, you know. Why does that last thing matter? It matters. A lot. Really though, this all relies on how you feel about her, Maiko. Kamiko grimaced as another hour passed and the weapon's weight doubled. Her hands were shaking with the effort from just holding it. Lifting it was becoming impossible to do. That's the thing, Akane. I don't know how I feel about Ino at all. I mean, I've never liked any other girls other than Sakura, and I'm ashamed to have ever liked her. Not only that, but I don't know Ino all that well. We barely talked when I was a guy. Then get to know her. Be her friend like she asked, you know. That way you can get to know her, and suddenly silence took over Akane's end of the conversation. Kamiko patiently waited for Akane to speak as she continued to swing her weapon. After a few minutes though, there was still no sound from Akane at all. Akane, are you damn it at all? I don't have time to talk to you right now, Maiko. There's this huge ass rabbit that needs its ass kicked right now. Matter of fact, it's war in here. We foxes will kill the rabbit menace. Kamiko's sweat dropped. Giant rabbit, I did put 2 or 3 of those in there for her to have fun with, I guess. I didn't think they would fight like that though. Wait, why is she calling me Maiko? Soon after Akane went off to fight the first war of clawed hairs, Yugao dropped down next to Kamiko and placed a hand on her shoulder. Alright now. That's enough for now. Every time we start training, this is what we will do as a warm-up. A warm, she's trying to kill me. For now though, it's time to work on your speed. You are pretty fast right now. Just outside of having the speed of a low Chunin. Kamiko nodded and slowly lowered the wooden weapon to the ground. So what are we going to do for that? I have weights on my legs and arms, so. Wait, you have weights on your arms and legs? Are they activated right now? How much are they? Kamiko nodded and said 30 pounds each, and that she had the wraps around her chest weighted at 20 pounds. Well then, that makes it a lot easier than having to start you off fresh with training weights then. I need all of those to be doubled though. You're trying to kill me. Kamiko yelled accusingly. Not really. That isn't my job, Yugao said while smiling, anyways this is to help you. Doubling everything past what you should be at forces your muscles to adapt much faster. It will be painful, but believe it's worth it. Kamiko groaned slightly and applied the needed chakra to double her weights. She immediately fell flat onto her face. What now? Well, that's it really. You need to get used to the weight on your legs before we move on. Once you are though, we'll move on to you learning how to handle an actual sword. Yugao helped the girl stand before turning away and leaving. You can keep all those weights on constantly except for the chest wrappings. You will suffer otherwise, were her parting words. Kamiko sighed and trudged away from the training field. She let her arms hang limply at her sides as she re-entered Konoha's village streets. They were just as filled as they were when the day had begun. There were less foreign ninja to be seen walking through stores, though she caught sight of one occasionally. For a moment Kamiko entertained the thought of going back to shopping for her apartment but decided against it. It's time for another visit to the springs anyways. Moving as fast as her weighed-down legs could carry her, Kamiko raced to the Konoha hot springs. She found it to be almost empty of any customers. There was hardly anyone daring to go near the place, and those who did seemed to be on guard for something. That fact didn't really register to Kamiko though. She just checked in and grabbed a towel to relax in. Placing her clothes and weights into one of the baskets for holding a customer's clothing, Kamiko quickly wrapped a towel around herself and sunk into the warmth of the spring's water. Kamiko sighed and as the water encircled almost her entire body. Nothing like having a spring all to yourself to relax in. She said to herself. Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing just a few minutes ago, someone said from across from her. Kamiko barely kept herself from crying out in fear as she suddenly jerked back and looked around until she found the source of the voice. Standing across from her was a girl with blonde hair and teal-colored eyes. Who are you? Kamiko asked. The girl rolled her eyes at Kamiko. You can't be serious, can you? You actually expect me to believe you don't know who I am? But I don't. I've never seen you before and I've seen a lot of people in Konoha. Oh, the girl blinked, you're serious. Well then, my name's Tamari. Kamiko. Tamari nodded and looked away from her. The two sat in relative silence for a while. Neither one of them paying the other one much attention. Kamiko thought of possibly talking to the girl but decided against it and instead relaxed into the water and let herself be pulled into her mindscape. She appeared in what seemed to be the remains of an open field of grass, but there were holes everywhere. What the hell happened here? Kamiko? Akane called from a crouching behind a not too distant tree line. Get over here now. Kamiko ran over to Akane and crouched down next to her. Akane, what's going on here? I told it was war, Maiko. We finally beat those damn rabbits out of the flower field, but they just won't give up. This is the first defense line for our home. Kimiko looked around and saw foxes of all colors and sizes hidden amongst the growth of the forest. Behind here, many of the larger foxes were rolling what looked like cannons towards the front. "This is insane," she whispered. Then an exploding sound went off above her head and a treetop began to fall down. She and Akane jumped out of the way to just barely miss being squashed to death. Rolling away from the fallen tree, Kimiko looked through a bush out onto the field. What she saw made zero sense. Hundreds upon hundreds of rabbits were hopping towards the tree line. Like the foxes, they came in a variety of colors and sizes. The tallest one being almost as big as what Kimiko thought Akane was when she turned into her demon form. They were lugging cannons along, and a few of them were carrying swords. There didn't seem to be a formation to them or any plan of action, but then, Kimiko didn't plan to be there to see if they had one. Pulling herself out of her mindscape as fast as possible, Kimiko came back to find Temari standing over her with their faces just inches from each other. Hi. Kimiko squeaked. A wild blush began to creep up her neck and to her cheeks. Temari frowned and glared at Kimiko. "I had been calling your name for the past 6 minutes. I was beginning to think that your brains had baked in here or something like that." Kimiko let out a nervous laugh. "Yeah, I space out a lot. Sometimes it can get to the point I don't hear the people around me." Temari sighed and shook her head. She sat down next to Kimiko and closed her eyes. Kimiko looked her up and down, appreciating her generously sized chest for a moment longer than needed. "I wonder if she is related to any of the ninja in the Chunin exams. I'll ask her." "Hey, are you related to any of the shinobi that are in the Chunin exams?" Temari turned and frowned slightly at Kimiko. "Yeah. Both of my brothers made it into the finals." "Why?" "Well, I have never seen you here before, so I just thought you were from another village come to watch the exams." After giving her a blank stare, Temari chuckled to herself slightly. "I forgot that fast that you don't know who I am. I'm also in the Chunin exams. I'll be taking part in the finals as well." Kimiko stared blankly back at her before her brain finally registered who was in front of her. "Holy shit. It's that Suna girl who beat the heck out of Lee's teammate Tenten. How did I not recognize her?" The sandy blonde-haired girl noticed the shock in Kimiko's eyes and smiled with pride. "Yep. I'm one of the only 2 girls that made it all the way to the finals. Those other fake Kinwaichi couldn't handle what was thrown at them and got swatted aside like flies." Kimiko smiled like she was happy for the other girl. "That's pretty amazing. Actually, I have heard of you. Heard you were really strong. Strong enough to be the fly swatter swatting the flies." Temari puffed out her chest with more pride than before. "That I am. My opponent couldn't even touch me in our match, I was so much better than her." Temari hesitated for a moment and let her smile falter. "I guess that means you know all about my family then, I guess." "Your family?" Kimiko said questioningly. "Yeah. My dad is the Kazukiage and my youngest brother is a known killer. Me and my other brother are known for being quite distant and mean to other people. We're kind of feared by a lot of people as a family. It's why I had this place all to myself when you arrived. No one dares fuck with me, so they try to avoid me altogether." She shrugged as if it didn't bother her, but couldn't hide the loneliness in her eyes from someone like Kimiko. Kimiko grabbed her arm and smiled at her. She found that since the girl was closer now she had to look up to her face. "Really? That's not cool, cause your family sounds kind of cool to me. Like a really family full of nothing but badasses. Ninja badasses at that too. I think you guys are just might be misunderstood, cause you don't seem all that mean and distant to me." Temari looked down at the smiling girl in a small bit of amazement. This wasn't the first time that she has told someone about who her family is. This was the first time, however, that the person she told hadn't immediately fled. Hell, once she mentioned her brother Gaara they usually began backing away. But not this girl in front of her. Temari smiled warmly at Kimiko. "Thanks," she said as she stood. "I must be going now. I've been here for the better part of an hour keeping people away. Maybe we'll see each other another time, huh?" Kimiko nodded and threw up a thumbs up at her. "Definitely." Temari waved as she walked off. Kimiko leaned back and sighed as she relaxed back onto the rocks with a content smile. Now that was interesting. I wonder if hey. Die already you damn rabbit." The next day found Kimiko at the Konoha Springs all over again. She had decided that coming here was a blessing she was going to take advantage of before and after her training sessions with Yugao. Now though, instead of being in the spring like all the others were, she was standing outside looking at the back of an old man with large white spiky hair. She was sure it was the same old man as the one she had gotten rid of the day before. From the number of women that had been chasing after him, Kimiko was surprised to not only see the man alive, but peeping all over again. I wonder is that the exact same spot from last time? After a second of thinking, Kimiko shrugged and walked up to the man, kunai in hand. She closed in on the man and dropped down behind him with a wicked grin. She then thrust a kunai upward screaming, 1,000 years of death. For a second nothing happened, then the old man slowly turned around with a completely beet red face. He stood awkwardly and hobbled away until he was a good distance from the springs and finally opened his mouth to let out a scream that meant her everywhere. Kimiko missed her target but still hit something. After random medic ninja who happened to be around took care of the man, Kimiko apologized for missing her mark. Missing your mark? What do you mean missing your mark? You tried to take away a man's pride and joy cold-heartedly. Kimiko scratched the back of her head. Yeah, well, I wasn't actually aiming there, you see, but that's beside the point. What are you doing peeping into the women's spring? That's against the law, I believe. The old man laughed as he turned and began to walk away. I assure you, young lady, that peeping on women is not against the law. Also, I am not peeping, I am doing my research for my book. Something a little girl like you wouldn't understand. A rock smashed into the back of the old man's head, knocking him onto his face. Fucking pervert with lame-ass excuses. Really glad the Hokage doesn't have someone like you overseeing my training. You'd probably have me work out naked. The old man suddenly appeared in front of Kimiko with an enormous frown on his face. Now you listen here, girlie. I only go after mature women, and while you may have an adult body, you are still just a child. In other words, respect your elders, you brat. Whatever. Kimiko started to walk off before the man grabbed her arm. What the hell? What the hell? Let me go, you pervert. Help. Someone help. Call the Hokage. He trying to rape me. The entire time she was yelling, Kimiko was punching the man in the chest. Hey, calm down, damn it. You are drawing a crowd. The old man tried to silence her with his hand, but she bit it. Ah. Shit. Fuck. Why did you do that? Kimiko just kept screaming about rape as she struggled against him. Sighing, he threw her over his shoulder and turned to leave. He came face to face with a horde of angry women in bath towels glaring at him with eyes of death. Damn near pissing himself, the old man fled with Kimiko. The women were in hot pursuit yelling at him to let the poor child go. He took twists and turns to get away from them, but every time he thought he was home free, they would suddenly show up again. When he lost in a large store, they appeared on top of the roofs. When he lost them in the woods, they appeared at the exit. When he lost them around the lake, they popped out of the water. He was beginning to feel he'd never get away when he suddenly remembered something. For fuck's sake, I'm a ninja. I should have already done this. With that said, the man shined away from the area to the other end of the village. Sighing in relief, he dropped Kimiko onto the ground. Rubbing her backside, Kimiko slowly came to a wobbly stand. Damn bastard. I'm a fucking kill you. Calm down, you brat. I just needed to talk to you was all. You didn't need to go and cause a scene. The man leaned against a tree and smirked down at the girl. Now I couldn't help but hear you say the Hokage was having someone oversee your training. Would you happen to Kimiko? I told you who I was already, she deadpanned. No, you didn't. You just tried to castrate me, he deadpanned back. Oh, well, what's it to you if I am? The old man jumped up and landed in front of her with his hands splayed out and his feet wide apart. He jerked his head around until he was facing her. Why, I am the great Toad Sage, the Lady Slayer, the most notorious Sannin of them all, and your new teacher Jiraiya. A soft wind blew dust between the two. Jiraiya stayed in his pose while Kimiko just looked at him like he was insane. After a few seconds of just staring at each other, Kimiko turned and walked away. Wait. Where are you going? Hey. Uzumaki Naruto, stop. Kimiko froze in place at the mention of her old name. She slowly turned around to face the old man with a shocked expression on her face. The Hokage told me what happened to you, kid, so don't look so surprised. Like I said, I'm your new teacher. Kimiko glared at the man like he was the source of evil. Stop that, Miko, and give that man a chance. I know him. Your parents knew him. Kimiko gave a slight gasp and softened her glare on the man, but only a little. The man lifted a questioning brow while Kimiko chewed her bottom lip. Do you know who my parents are, and don't lie. I'll know if you lie to me, old man. Jiraiya sighed and looked up towards the sky sadly. Yes, I knew your parents, Naruto. It's Kimiko, she said. Right. Kimiko, I knew them, for your father was my apprentice. Your mother was like a daughter to me in many ways. The two meant a great deal to me. Jiraiya nodded to himself as he seemed somewhat lost in thought. Kimiko looked at him, unsure of what to think of him. On one hand, he was most obviously an enormous pervert that needs an even more enormous beatdown, but at the same time he seemed like he might be a good guy. She may not know her parents, but she was sure that there was no way they'd be close to someone who didn't mean well. Show me something. Jiraiya shook his head clear of his thoughts. What do you mean by that, brat? Stop calling me that. I mean, show me a move or something. Yuga said she would be training me in to use the sword, and you were going to be training me in jutsus. I want to see one of yours or I won't train under you. Jiraiya smirked at her and held out his hand. Kimiko looked at it and saw chakra slowly gathering into the palm of the man's hand. The chakra began to spin around rapidly in his hand, turning into a blue sphere and making a loud whirring sound. He turned around and slammed the sphere into the tree he was just on and blew it away. Along with the two next to it. Kamiko's eyes widened as she watched the three trees get launched backwards into the sky. She tried to mentally compare it to the attacks she watched Sabuza use when he first fought Kakashi and was unable to find any move that could compare with what she had just seen. You know Kamiko, that move wasn't even all its power at its fullest. I had to hold back greatly if I didn't want to draw the attention of every Anbu member in and around the village. Kamiko clung to Jiraiya's arm, practically foaming at the mouth. Teach me the ways of the ninja, oh great one. Jiraiya laughed and shook the girl off of his arm. Alright. Don't get you panties in a bunch. First things first, how good is your chakra control? My chakra control? After a moment of thinking, Kamiko just shrugged. Jiraiya sighed and shook his head. The Hokage said you were close with the Kyuubi. Akane, Kamiko growled out while glaring at Jiraiya. Her name is Akane. Oh. Well then, are you close with her, Akane? You are, then good. She should know if you have good control of your chakra or not. Kamiko nodded her head as she tried to talk to Akane. Hey Akane, can you tell me how my chakra control is? We haven't really worked with it much, so I don't know. What do you mean we haven't worked with your chakra? What do you think all that training with you element chakra was? I forgot about that. Akane sighed as she relaxed into the tree she was in. Well, you have great chakra control, Maiko. With the alteration of the seal and all the training you have done, it has improved greatly. Okay then. So how is the war coming? Kamiko started to walk around and avoided looking at Jiraiya. Him watching her was making her uncomfortable. Oh, that thing. We finished that yesterday, you know. Those be damned rabbits really thought that they could come into our territory and take it from us. After we were down with them, my house has a new rabbit fur rug with matching rabbit fur curtains. Akane smiled with pleasure at her success. Kamiko chuckled. You guys must have not stopped fighting for one moment, huh? What? Oh, right, time passes differently in your mindscape, Maiko. This war lasted a month and a half in here. Kamiko was unsure of what to think about that. She shrugged it off as completely unimportant. Well, thanks, Akane. Just one more thing, why do you keep calling me Maiko? I like the sound of it. Also, I couldn't call you Kami now, could I? That just seemed to be asking for trouble, you know. Okay then, that makes sense. Kamiko stopped pacing and turned back towards Jiraiya. She said I have great chakra control. So much that we should skip all chakra exercises. Hey, don't use me in your lies. Asanin shook his head. Be that as it may, we should still have you do them just to keep that fact a fact. Kamiko groaned at her failed attempt at avoiding chakra exercises. Anyways, meet me at training ground 15 tomorrow in the late afternoon. Now I have a question for you, girly. Don't call me that either. Sure, whatever. Now how is it you have gotten so used to being a girl already? You have just become one just a little over a week ago from what I was told. Kamiko shrugged. I don't know really. Everything just kinda seems natural, you know. Like I was never that poor sap I used to be. Jiraiya frowned at her words but decided there was nothing he could say about it. Alright then, see ya kid. With a perverted giggle and sketchpad that came from nowhere, he disappeared. Sighing, Kamiko left the area to try and see if she just might be able to get to Yugao before she was late. It was great to have finally met her other teacher, but damn, he ate up her time. Running along the forest edge, Kamiko noticed Ino walking aimlessly around like she was lost. Having a small internal war with herself, Kamiko ran out of the trees and suddenly appeared in front of the blonde girl. Hey Ino, ah. Popping up in front of the girl's face, Kamiko received a swift punch to the nose. Falling back, she clutched her now bleeding nose in her hand and looked up at Ino with tears in her eyes. What the hell was that for? Ino blinked at the girl, went wide-eyed. Holy shit, Kamiko, I'm so sorry. Here, let me see it. She fell to her knees and pulled back Kamiko's hands. The blood was steadily flowing from her nose down her face. Doing a few hand seals, she placed her hands over Kamiko's nose with a faint green glow around them. Doing her best not to sneeze, Kamiko waited for Ino to finish. There we go. I fixed it all up. The two helped each other stand and Kamiko rubbed her nose and face. She wiped the blood onto the back of a random man who walked past her to get rid of it. The guy turned around and glared at her before checking out her body. His eyes lingered on her chest as he spoke. Might I ask what you put on my back, young lady? Ino crossed in front of him to block his view. Her face was red with displeasure. She didn't put anything on you, so move on, you pervert. The man glared at Ino and pushed her aside into a stack of crates. Stay out of this, you bitch. Kamiko rushed to help her as the crates fell on her, but the man grabbed her arm and smirked down at her. Leave her be sexy. She's not the one I want to get to know. Kamiko clenched her fist and tried to keep her anger in check. My friend might be hurt. Let me go so I can check on her. He scared at her and pulled her closer to him. Are you asking me or are you telling me? She's getting what she deserves anyways. Now how's about you come with me? I'm sure we can entertain each other." Kamiko looked down to not look at the man. Just the sight and sound of him was start to anger her beyond belief. "I think you can entertain yourself, sir," she gritted out. "My friend needs me." Again she tried to go to Ino, but the man wouldn't have it. He roughly yanked her back and shoved her into an alleyway. She tumbled and fell on her back as the guy jumped on top of her as the man ripped open her shirt and bra in the process. "Oh fucks yeah, I'm going to have fun with you, slut." The man went to grab her bear when he heard low growls all around him. He looked up and found himself in a pitch black area. All the buildings and people outside of the alleyway had disappeared. There was nothing but the low growls and the wolves that suddenly appeared surrounding him. He frantically looked for a way out when he heard another low growl that was much louder than the others. Looking down, he saw the rage-filled eyes of Kamiko glaring at him. Her eyes were suddenly glowing bright, but yet they were an impossibly dark gray. The pupils of her eyes slowly became smaller until they disappeared and her hair started to flow around the two of them. The man immediately hopped off of her and backed away from her as much as he dared with the wolves behind him. The wolves continued to just growl at the man, but slowly began to circle the two. Standing slowly, Kamiko let her hair fall in front of her face as it flowed all around her upper body. "You were going to try and rape me, weren't you?" she said in a cold, emotionless voice as she brushed dirt off her clothes. "You were going to force a girl who wanted nothing to do with you to do whatever you wanted to do with her and believed you'd get away with it. I wasn't going to rape anyone." The man yelled as he whipped his head around every which way. "You just needed to relax and I was trying to help you was all that I was doing, lady." Kamiko chuckled softly as she took slow deliberate steps towards him. With each step, she gave off a small burst of silver gray chakra that seemed to make the wolves around them more and more aggressive looking. "I don't think you are telling me the truth, and you know what? That's all that matters here is what I think. You have no power here and I have all power." Laughing, she lifted her eyes to gaze at him through her hair with an insanely pleased face. "You, my friend, have stepped into my own little personal hell and it's time for a little fun." Laughing all the way, Kamiko and the wolves slowly advanced on the man who was sweating and shaking out of pure fear. His screams were death on the ears of the world. Frantically tying her torn shirt around her chest, Kamiko ran out of the alleyway to grab Ino. "What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck?" she thought over and over again as she tried to forget what had just happened. People looked at her like she was crazy as she moved the crates of Ino. She found Ino unconscious with a small trickle of blood flow down the side of her head. Grabbing her quickly, Kamiko ran for the hospital. The entire time her mind was racing like mad with what happened. How did I know? Why did I? This is fucking insane. A cane. Damn it. A cane. Ah shit. I'm up, Maiko. What is it? What happened? A cane rubbed her eyes as she rolled out of her bed and yawned. "Come on, Maiko, tell me already." Kamiko tried to tell Akane what had happened with the man, but was unable to keep her thoughts straight. They kept slipping into a babbling nonsense and annoyed Akane. She decided to just rummage through her memories and see what she missed. After a moment of searching, Akane found the memory she needed and completely freaked out. "Holy fucking shit. What the hell, Maiko? I don't know, Akane. I don't know what happened to me. He attacked me and Kamiko was losing on the inside but was able to appear calm when she reached the hospital." Kicking in the door, Kamiko called for help and handed Ino over to a group of nurses and a doctor. She wanted to go with them when they took her away, but the doctor told her to stay in the room and wait. Kamiko sat and waited as Akane racked her brain to understand what had happened. Nothing she could come up with made even the slightest bit of sense to her. Both worriedly searched for anything sane within the events until the doctor came out with Ino walking beside him with a slight wobble. Kamiko rushed up to her and grabbed her hands while looking at the doctor. Should she really be walking around unsupported right now? The doctor smiled and patted both their shoulders. "I can assure you that your friend is going to be just fine. All she needs is a little rest and relaxation for the next 2 to 3 days." Kamiko nodded and looped her arms through Ino's. "I can walk on my own," she said with a slight pout. "The doctor just said I was fine." "Well, sometimes doctors can be wrong about things, Ino, so it is always good to play it safe for a bit," Kamiko said, receiving a slight glare from the offended doctor. "Let me just walk you home, okay? It would make me feel better." Ino glanced at Kamiko and slowly leaned into her. Kamiko stiffened but slowly relaxed and held onto Ino's waist. "Okay," Ino sighed happily after seeing she wouldn't reach extra contact. The two walked out of the hospital and towards Ino's home. For the most part, the two of them stayed completely silent. Ino was enjoying the closeness of Kamiko way too much to think of anything to talk about, while Kamiko was doing the best to not think of what happened to the man. She still didn't fully understand what had happened, and neither did Akane for that matter. The two were just down the street when someone found it fit to disturb the silence between the two of them. "So I see you found something other than training to fill your time, Kamiko." Kimiko froze, jerking Ino to a stop and whipped her head to the right of her to find Yugao glaring at her. Care to explain why you weren't at the training grounds? Kimiko stuttered out words incoherently as she tried to come up with an excuse that would, hopefully, not lead to a punishing training session with Yugao. Ino stepped forward and bowed slightly to the long purple-haired ninja. It's my fault that she was late. I got hurt and she had to take me to the hospital, and now she's walking me home. Yugao nodded and looked at Ino. Her forehead was tightly wrapped in bandages. I see then. Do you care to tell me how this came to happen? Immediately the two younger girls launched into their story. Yugao scowled when they mentioned how they reacted at the sight of Kimiko. It obviously disgusted her that a man would come onto a girl who was much younger than him that way. That is just sad. Men these days do nothing but think with their dicks nowadays. Ino blushed and Kimiko just shrugged. What did you do about the man, Kimiko? What? The man? If he wouldn't let you go, then what did you do to him? Yugao asked. Ino's face fixed into an unhappy, puzzled expression. Yeah, what did happen to that guy? I really wanted to kick his ass myself. Fear flashed in Kimiko's eyes briefly, but she quickly hid it. What did I do? Well, I kicked him, of course. Yeah, I gave him a swift kick to the coconuts and made that bastard wobble away. Kimiko and Ino laughed, though Kimiko's was slightly strained. Yugao glared suspiciously at the Kimiko and lifted her hand into the air. Instantly, an Anbu appeared next to her on one knee. Lion, escort Miss Yamanaka home and tell her parents that she is in need of rest. Lion nodded and grabbed hold of Ino's shoulder lightly and shunshined away with her. Yugao looked at Kimiko, who was miles away twiddling her thumbs, and sighed. We are going to see the Hokage about this, she said to herself, and shunshined away with Kimiko. Both the Hokage and Kimiko were both surprised with their sudden appearance in his office. Yugao? I thought you two would be training right now. What brings you two here all of a sudden? Yugao explained what had happened between Ino, Kimiko, and the man that the two had run into to the Hokage. Kimiko, being completely confused with the situation, glanced between them every now and then. When she finished explaining the situation, the Hokage sat back with serious expression on his face. I see now. This is something that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. Hey you guys, what are you two talking about? I'm so fucking lost right now. Kimiko said, slightly annoyed. Watch your mouth, young lady, the Hokage said sternly, but yet softly in the way only he could. What we are talking about is you and your lie about what happened to that man, Kimiko. It is obvious that you were hiding something from Yugao. Kimiko's eyes widened as she didn't expect to be caught in her lie. Akane, what should I do now? Akane shook her head as she watched a rabbit hopping along the edge of her forest. Tell them, Maiko. Neither of us could figure out what the hell was going on and we need to know. If they might be able to help us figure this out, it's worth telling them. Nodding, Kimiko sat down in a chair in front of the Hokage's desk. She looked at him with clear fear in her eyes and told him what happened. He scared at her and pulled her closer to him. Are you asking me or are you telling me? She's getting what she deserves anyways. Now how's about you come with me? I'm sure we can entertain each other. Kimiko looked down to not look at the man. Just the sight and sound of him was start to anger her beyond belief. I think you can entertain yourself, sir, she gritted out. My friend needs me. Again she tried to go to Ino, but the man wouldn't have it. He roughly yanked her back and shoved her into an alleyway. She tumbled and fell on her back as the guy jumped on top of her as the man ripped open her shirt and bra in the process. Oh fucks yeah, I'm going to have fun with you, slut. The man went to grab her bear when he heard low growls all around him. He looked up and found himself in a pitch black area. All the buildings and people outside of the alleyway had disappeared. There was nothing but the low growls and the wolves that suddenly appeared surrounding him. He frantically looked for a way out when he heard another low growl that was much louder than the others. Looking down, he saw the rage-filled eyes of Kimiko glaring at him. Her eyes were suddenly glowing bright, but yet they were an impossibly dark gray. The pupils of her eyes slowly became smaller until they disappeared and her hair started to flow around the two of them. The man immediately hopped off of her and backed away from her as much as he dared with the wolves behind him. The wolves continued to just growl at the man, but slowly began to circle the two. Standing slowly, Kimiko let her hair fall in front of her face as it flowed all around her upper body. You were going to try and rape me, weren't you? She said in a cold, emotionless voice as she brushed dirt off her clothes. You were going to force a girl who wanted nothing to do with you to do whatever you wanted to do with her and believed you'd get away with it. I wasn't going to rape anyone. The man yelled as he whipped his head around every which way. You just needed to relax and I was trying to help you was all that I was doing, lady. Kimiko chuckled softly as she took slow deliberate steps towards him. With each step, she gave off a small burst of silver gray chakra that seemed to make the wolves around them more and more aggressive looking. I don't think you are telling me the truth, and you know what? That's all that matters here is what I think. You have no power here and I have all power. Laughing, she lifted her eyes to gaze at him through her hair with an insanely pleased face. You my friend have stepped into my own little personal hell, and it's time for a little fun. Laughing all the way, Kimiko and the wolves slowly advanced on the man who was sweating and shaking out of pure fear. She held out her hand, and the strange silver grey chakra swirled around her hand, slowly forming into a long thin sword. Tell me, what's your names? What does it matter to you? He asked in a shaky voice. Kimiko shrugged and twirled her chakra-made weapon. It doesn't matter. I was just being polite and asking, but if you wish to do away with the politeness so be it. She made a shooing motion at him, and the wolves instantly began their attack on the man. He screamed and threw up his arms to try and block his face. The pack of wolves tore at his arms and legs, leaving them a bloody useless mess. He screamed and screamed as they clawed his chest to shreds, but for some reason they avoided going for the kill. For what felt like hours, the pack tore into the man. Kimiko savored the man's screams until she started to pout. That's enough, I'm starting to feel a bit left out of the fun you guys. The wolves pulled away from the mutilated man and walked behind Kimiko. Each one bowed to her in turn as they passed her. The man curled into a ball and sobbed. Please, he begged, let me go. I have done nothing wrong. I was only trying to have a bit of fun. I swear I wouldn't have hurt you. Kimiko mocked, yawned and rolled her eyes. Please don't be such a big baby. She walked forward and stopped in front of the man with a smile. Plus, I'm just trying to have some fun like you were. I get some training out of this too. Grabbing onto her chakra sword with both of her hands, Kimiko lifted her weapon over her head and brought it down just like Yugao showed her. In one swing, she sliced off all of the skin on the outer side of the man's left arm. He screamed as his skin was torn away. Again Kimiko brought the sword up and down, doing the exact same to his other arm. Over and over she repeated this action on the man's body, slicing of the skin for his cheeks, his arms, both of his legs, and the entirety of his back. Blood leaked all around him as he breathed raggedly on his skinless knees. Tears streamed down and burned his face. Kimiko stood over him with her hair still flowing freely around her body. She was smirking slightly as she looked at the man. With the amount of blood that he had lost he should be dead, but her new chakra was flowing through his veins now from coming in contact with him so much. It somehow gave him an endless amount of blood to spill, and Kimiko loved it. She let go of the chakra sword as it returned to her body. Are you enjoying yourself, Shinda? Shinda? He asked. Kimiko smiled and puffed out her bare chest proudly. Yeah. You needed a name so I gave you one. From this point forward, you are Shinda. Kimiko giggled like it was her own inside joke, but it wasn't lost on the man. From this point forward, he was Shinda. From this point forward, he was dead. Knowing that there was no way out of this, he exploded with anger. How dare you, you bitch. You think you have any right to be doing this? All I wanted was a good fuck. Was that too hard to ask for? Damn you for this. Just damn you and go fuck yourself. Kimiko blinked and laughed at him. I think that Shinda doesn't know when to admit he was wrong. Her chakra quickly grew into an immense mass around her. She kneeled down and caressed the side of his face with a kind smile on her face. Don't worry, Shinda. Before I am done, you will admit to your crime, okay? I promise you, you won't die before then. For a moment he stared at her in horror like she was insane before she quickly reached up and jammed two of her fingers into one of his eyes. Shinda screamed and screamed as she dug around in his eye socket, tearing everything she touched out of it. Ah. You won't be needing anything in there, so don't squirm around so much, okay? Okay. Eventually, Kimiko slid her fingers out of his socket. She looked at her fingers before standing and licked all of the blood off of it. The chakra mass around began to take shape in the form of 5 tails as she finished off the blood. I would like to play with you some more, but my love needs me soon. You shouldn't have pushed her, you know. The tails wrapped around an arm and a leg respectively, leaving the 5th tail to tear away Shinda's pants and wrap around his crotch. What are you doing to me? Just let me go. I'll do anything, just let me go. Kimiko shook her head and stared at him emotionlessly. No, now repent. He went to yell at her again, but began screaming as 5 tails began to burn and melt his body. Repent, she repeated without emotion. Shinda thrashed as he tried to free himself from the tail's grasp. He cried and screamed as the tails inched higher and higher up his body, devouring everything they touched on his body like a snake. Again she told him to repent. Half of his arms and legs were now completely gone, and the 5th tail had burrowed into his stomach. The pain was causing black spots to appear in Shinda's vision as his mind tried to drag him into the sweet bliss of unconsciousness but was unable to do so for him. He looked up at Kimiko as she looked down at him. He no longer saw a young woman torturing him but a bloodthirsty demon devouring him. A demon with wolves at its beck and demanded repentance. Its eyes promised death and its hands delivered torture. Nothing could be done to escape the hell he had entered. He whispered something in between ragged breaths as he stopped struggling. What was that? Kimiko asked. The man looked into the eyes of death and gave in. I repent. I apologize for everything, for all of the evil I have done. Please, please forgive me. Kimiko looked at him then closed her eyes. His body was restored to its full health, as if she had never touched him, for a mere second before it exploded into a bloody mess. She had taken away all of his wounds and in an instant reapplied them in a destructive manner. Blood stained the floor as Kimiko walked away. Repent, the meaning of that word is different here. There is no forgiveness. As she walked, the world around slowly began to change. The buildings returned and the wolves disappeared as if they were never there. Eventually everything was as it should be again, but Kimiko was lost. Lost and slowly gaining fear on scale she had never known before. What the hell was that? She felt her hands and face, but felt nothing but herself. The blood that gotten on her was now gone. It was like she had had a nightmare that was more vivid than life was itself. Grabbing her shirt off the ground, Kimiko looked down at her naked chest. Dreams don't tear apart people's clothing. Yugao and the third Hokage looked at a tear-streaked and shaking Kimiko with disbelieving eyes. The two of them were quite shaken themselves. The things that she had just told them were almost like the horrors of Ibiki's private interrogation office. No one knows what he actually does in there, but that sounded like something that would happen in it. Hokage Yugao looked to her leader unsure of how to handle a situation like the one they were just handed. The Hokage sighed and looked at his pipe in hand with displeasure. Kimiko, he said drawing her attention, is there anything that Akane can tell us about what happened? No, Akane was just as freaked out about this as I was. If not more so than me. Kimiko looked down at her hands as if they were subject to attack her themselves. The Hokage stood and went to stand at his window. Looking out at the village, he sighed a defeated sigh. This is obviously something that occurred when you lost control of your emotions. What makes you say that? Kimiko asked. Yugao looked at her and sighed. Anyone who is about to be raped experiences a moment at which their emotions get out of control. In that time either fear or anger take over as the main thing any person would feel no matter what. Yugao looked at the Hokage with a worried glance. At the moment we aren't really worried about what you did and what it means about you. Right now what we need to know is how to make it so this doesn't happen again. Kimiko quickly stood with wide eyes. What are you talking about? I need to know what's going on here with me. I killed someone. I killed someone who didn't deserve to die. The Hokage turned around and walked over to Kimiko. Laying his hands on her shaking shoulders, he kneeled down to look her in the eyes. Kimiko, I understand what you mean, but that is something that will take time. That is time that we don't really have at the moment, with the Chunin exams entering its very last stretch. As I am sure you have noticed, we have many foreign merchants, civilians, lords, and ninja entering our village already. For the rest of this month that activity will increase until the day for the third exam to begin occurs. We will even have the presence of 2 other cages in our village at that time. All our attention must be on who is coming and going. Kimiko. Believe me when I say I want to get to the bottom of this as much as you do, but I just can't spare the time that would be needed. Do you understand, Kimiko? Kimiko looked down and clenched her fist in aggravation. She understood what the Hokage was saying, but she wanted something done as soon as possible. Yes, I understand, old man. Kimiko turned and quickly left before anything more could be said. Yugao and the Hokage watched as she walked down the dirt path away from the Hokage tower. Hokage, are you sure that there is nothing we can do to help ease her mind? Yugao sighed. The Hokage grunted and sat in his chair. Like I told her, believe me when I say I wish there was something we could do right now. Yugao nodded and left to find her friend Hana. The Hokage sighed as his office became a stale silent dome. Sometimes, I understand Tsunade's need to drink almost every bottle of sake she sees. Standing on the edge of training ground 7, Kimiko looked around the field. It looked like all of the other training fields with the acceptation of it having a slightly large lake than the others. That was a direct result of her old feelings for Sakura. How it was the cause of that, Sakura made sure she wouldn't remember. There was no real reason for her to return here since she wasn't to be training here at the moment. Though it wasn't like she got much training done to begin with in the first place. Kimiko was just in the need of a secluded area for her to try and relax. Unfortunately there was a lone ninja standing in the middle of the field. Kakashi turned around when he felt a presence enter the open space of the training field. Can I help you with something? He asked with his patented eye smile. That eye smile really got to Kimiko for some reason she just couldn't understand. Shaking her head, she turned to leave and bumped into Jireya's chest. Jiraiya nodded at Kakashi as he placed a hand on Kimiko's head. Sorry if my student was disturbing you, Kakashi. I lost track of her some time ago and it seems she is already causing a bit of trouble for our ever-respectful cage. He chuckled softly to himself at the end. Kakashi nodded his head. If she is anything like Naruto then I understand what you mean by that. The two laughed. Kimiko, already not in a good mood, didn't find that to be all that funny. She walked up to Kakashi and stomped on the Jonin's toes with the heel of her shoe. What is that supposed to mean, huh? Kakashi looked down at the girl like she was crazy. Is that supposed to be an insult or some other thing? Well, is it? Jiraiya grabbed Kamiko's face and awkwardly saluted Kakashi. She's been having a pretty bad day. My formal apologies, Kakashi. The masked ninja waved it off. None needed. Jiraiya nodded and shunshined away with Kamiko. Kakashi stood and stared at where the two had just left from. I wonder if she has some connection to Naruto in some way, he mushed, then looked at his foot. More importantly, that stomp of hers was pretty heavy. I wonder long how this delayed reaction is going to fuck. Jiraiya appeared with Kamiko in tow in the male's portion of the Konoha hot springs. Kamiko was struggling against his hold with all of her might when he suddenly tossed her into the water. Ah. What the fuck, you damn pervert. Drenched, she glared at the man like any other completely pissed woman would be. Jiraiya knew that look all too well and knew that he had to be careful with how he handled the situation. A woman giving that look, no matter how young, was extremely prone to beating him within an inch of his. Now Kamiko. I brought you here for a reason. Kamiko continued to glare at him. I thought that since you weren't training with Yugao this morning, I could teach you something that could save your life someday. He was glad to see that glare of death tuned down to an angry pout as she wadded out of the water. What would that be exactly? He walked past her and out to the middle of the spring. Why, it is water walking, Kamiko. Most people look at it as just another type of chakra control exercise, but I see this as a skill that can be useful for fighting certain types of opponents or fleeing. Kamiko remembered how Kakashi and Zabuza had fought on the river on their mission to wave. It was definitely something that could be useful to know. So I'm guessing that this is like tree walking. Apply the right amount of chakra to my feet and whatnot, right? Smiling at her, Jiraiya nodded and made a few hand signs. Jamming his hands into the water, the spring glowed a bright red for a moment before he took his hands out. You're right, Kamiko, but there is going to be a slight difference here from other water walking. What could be different about it? Why, the punishment for not succeeding, of course, Kamiko. Kamiko gave him a confused look. The springs are hot, right? So what if I double the temperature of the water? Kamiko's eyes widened as she took a step away from the spring. You're just like Yugao. You guys are truly trying to kill me. Jiraiya chuckled momentarily, then a sudden seriousness fell over him. Just do it, Kamiko. No matter how good your chakra control is, this is something new for learn, so it won't be easy. Well, you do this, I'll tell you anything you want to know. To a certain extent, that is. Kamiko sighed and stepped on the water. Wait. Take your shirt off. A half-drunken bottle of sake fell from the sky, slapped the toad sage in the back of his head with enough force to push him into the scalding spring water. Jumping out of the water with smoke surrounding him, he screamed. The women on the other side of the spring looked up into the sky and gladly saluted. The image they were now seeing was a godsend. That scene was what could be seen when looking at the Anti-Jiraiya Association flag. He fell at the feet of Kamiko, who shoved her foot into his face. I don't know where that came from, but you deserved it. I thank you, whoever was the cause of it. A blonde lady in a faraway area was walking with her assistant when she suddenly started to smile. After the horrible loss the two had just incurred not too long ago, her assistant gave an uncertain look. My lady? She asked. Looking at her assistant, the blonde woman smiled even wider. Do you remember that bottle of sake I threw in the direction of Konoha last night because I got a feeling I had to? The assistant nodded. Well, something tells me that that bottle just served its purpose somehow. Now why do I have to take my shirt off? I knew you were a pervert, but I thought you said you weren't a pedo. Kamiko grounded her foot deeper into Jiraiya's face as he muffled out a response. What was that again? Stomp, I couldn't hear you. Stomp, maybe you speak up. Stomp, come on, you fucking pervert. Stomp, speak up. Stomp, 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 stomp. Jiraiya laid with his hands buried into the cracked ground of the spring as the rest of his body twitched. I think you killed him, Maiko. Not like he didn't deserve it, you know. I mean, you're way too young for that. Kamiko sighed and walked over to the edge of the spring water. Yeah. Hey, while I do this, can you tell me more about my mom? Sure, Maiko dear. Nodding, Kamiko took a deep breath and tried to stand on the water. She immediately fell in. As Kamiko started screaming, a cane began eating a rabbit she had just finished roasting. For some reason this was giving her a bad feeling. Let me start from the beginning. Your mother wasn't originally from the Leaf Village. She was born in a village that was just east of the Land of Waves, you know. It was the village hidden in the whirlpools. The Hidden Whirlpool Village, or the Hidden Family as others would call it. Why's that? How come I have never heard of this village before? Kamiko asked after pulling herself out the water for the third time. She quickly ran over and kicked Jiraiya in the face as he began to pull himself out of the ground. That was mean, Maiko. Anyways, the village was called that because it's known to be a very incestuous place. Within it, it only housed one clan, you know. One entire family to make up the entire Hidden Whirlpool Village. That clan, Maiko. It was supposed to be your family. They were the Uzumaki clan. You never hear about them because they were all wiped out. The people, village, and all. Kamiko was making fine progress her seventh tryout until a cane said those words. Her wobbling legs gave out below her and she fell in. I know Maiko, it is a terrible thing. Your clan was the largest the ninja world had ever seen. You made up and ran an entire village of just yourselves. Though truth be told you guys didn't even reach half of the Hidden Sand village's population at the time, which are the lowest population of the 5 great villages you know. The only reason anyone even knew about your clan was because of the marriage between Senju Hashirama and Uzumaki Mido. If those two had never met, maybe you would still have a clan today. Hidden tears rushed down Kimiko's face as she thought of the family that should have been hers. I want to hear about the village sometime, but not now, just want to hear about my mom. The Kane nodded in understanding as Kimiko kicked Jiraiya once again in the face. I understand Maiko, and please stop that. You're going to give him brain damage doing that. Now your mother was sent away from the village. She was the last pure-blooded Uzumaki left alive at the time, and the others saw it fit to ensure that she was out of the village, lest the worst came to be, you know. At the time your mother was a young, loud, brass little girl. She had a chubby little face with the most wonderful trait she had physically. A full length of straight red hair down to the middle of her back. Many of the guys made fun of her for that since it made her look like a tomato of sorts. They all met one of your mother's greatest traits when they did that though. She had a very short and very explosive temper, you know. That temper of hers got her into and out of all sorts of trouble throughout her academy years and years as a ninja as well. There wasn't anyone who didn't respect your mother Maiko. Those who fought beside her were honored to be on her team. All who fought against her were respectful and acknowledging of her strength and skills. The few that were able to truly call her a friend felt privileged to know such a kind-hearted woman. That includes you, father, and even me, you know. Kimiko stood perfectly still in the middle of the spring, with her eyes closed and arms out like she was preparing for a hug. A smile was playing across the young girl's face as she listened to Akane talk about her mother. Jiraiya, who had finally freed himself from the ground, watched her carefully. It had only been half an hour, if that, and the girl was already getting quite the hang of the water walking. Is there anything that my mom did that was, you know, just beyond belief to others? Kimiko started to twirl on the water slowly. Outside of how her temper matched, if not, surpassed mine. There is the fact that she's so proficient with the sword that samurai tried to get her to stop being a kunoichi and join their ranks instead. Your mother not only refused, but beat the crap out of about 50 or so samurai who insulted the shinobi lifestyle. Kimiko laughed and tripped over her foot as she was hopping backwards and tumbled onto her back. Sitting up she pouted until she noticed the lack of any burning sensation. I did it. Fucks yeah, I did it. Kimiko hopped around, whopped in joy at her success. Jiraiya and Akane watched Kimiko hop around with amused expressions on their faces. Jiraiya clapped to get the young girl's attention. Good job there, Kimiko. I didn't expect you to get this technique down so quickly. I must say, for being just a brat you are quite impressive. Kimiko puffed out her chest with pride. Well, I am superior to anyone else you know, she said with an air of arrogance. Jiraiya smirked at how Kimiko used her name. Alright now, don't be turning a Chiha or Hyuga on me now. Their personalities were and are sorely lacking. Kimiko stuck her tongue out at him and turned away from him. Anyways Kimiko, I still need you to take off your shirt. Slowly turning only her head, she glared Jiraiya down intensely. There's a good reason for Kimiko. I just need to see your seal. It might help. Help what, your erotic mind? Kimiko said icily. No, it might help you understand what happened this morning with that man. Kimiko took a step back as she suddenly remembered how her day begun. I just want to make sure everything is okay with Kimiko. After a moment of hesitation, Kimiko sighed and took off her shirt. You touch me, and no one will ever find your body. Jiraiya gulped and nodded as he looked at Kimiko's seal. It looked nothing like it should. There were parts that he recognized, but other parts of the seal were serving completely different uses now. It's as I thought, your seal has changed in an odd way. The seal was supposed to mix you and the Akane's chakra together until they were one. Now it's no longer doing that. It seems to be storing her chakra so that it is separate from yours. Not only that, but it is doing something else that I can't understand. Kimiko looked up at Jiraiya as he stood up. What do you mean by that? Like you don't know what it's doing? The Sannin shook his head as thought. For some reason it seems to be converting your chakra. Converting it, yes. This is what some ninja will have done to them so that they can use jutsus that they actually shouldn't be able to use whatsoever. Though I can't tell what your seal is converting yours to or why for that reason. Kimiko put her shirt back on and looked down at her stomach with worry. Well, I have an affinity for wind and water. Jiraiya shook his head. That doesn't tell me anything but what to train you in. This kid isn't changing your chakra for another affinity. It looks more like it's changing it into some sort of nature chakra, but it's not of the toads. He mushed apart to himself. Looking at Kimiko, Jiraiya sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The Hokage told me what happened between you and the man, but he didn't tell me what all occurred. Did you see anything around you while you defended yourself from that man? Kimiko looked down at her open hand sadly. Defend myself is the wrong words to use. I didn't notice much around me. It was pitch black everywhere, but I could still see the guy clearly. I had this strange chakra wrapped all around me like it was a cloak or something. There were wolves there too. They just sort of appeared out of nowhere and seemed to wait for some signal or something. Jiraiya's eyes widened slightly as he stepped forward and grabbed her shoulders. Wolves. Are you sure of that? What color were they? What color was the chakra? Himiko shoved his hands off of her and stepped away from him. What the hell? Keep your hands off me, and why does that stuff even matter? Jiraiya stared at the girl like he had never even seen her before. I'm sorry, Kimiko. I think I can help you out, but it is going to take some time for me to prepare what is needed. Jiraiya shunshined away, leaving a completely confused Kimiko in the middle of the springs. What the hell? Kimiko nor anyone else saw Jiraiya after that. For the next 2.5 weeks Kimiko trained rigorously with Yugao. She had learned the basics of wielding a sword and was able to wield even the heaviest of swords with just one hand. The young girl had mastery of the dancing of the crescent moon, along with eye beheading, and had modified both to fit both of her wind and water affinities, which she had full mastery of now as well. She used a long red sword with a pure sliver handle. A long black sash that was to be wrapped around her wrist hung from the end of the hilt. The cane had taught her to master her two affinities to the best of abilities at the same time. She had a number of justice in her arsenal that she had already mastered. There were even a few that she was in the progress of creating for the Chunin exams. Most of them were wind-based, but a few were even ice-based. Himiko had had many meetings with Ino during her training. The two had gone shopping and have talked about everything from the way they dress to why the sea and sky is blue. Kimiko tried to keep her distance from the girl, along with most of the male population of Konoha, but couldn't seem to help and gravitate around her. The girls were practically joined at the hip. So joined that they felt that there was little of anything they couldn't share with each other. Himiko had been able to reintroduce herself to each member of the Genin 9, with the exception of Sasuke and herself of course. No seemed to cause her much trouble. Shino was his usually stoic self and didn't do much more than watch her. Kiba was as loud and energetic as he usually was, flirting madly with her constantly. Akamaru was on the road to recover and was able to move around somewhat, so he finally pulled himself out of a gloom that had clung to him since his defeat. Though many are sure it's only because he has yet to see the blonde-haired ninja responsible. Hinata was shy, but tried to hold conversations with her whenever she could. Sakura avoided her unless another person was there with them. She was clearly afraid of Kimiko, and Kimiko loved knowing it. Choji and her had eat-offs that quickly caused the two to bond, and Shikamaru naturally followed in his own way. He found her too troublesome like almost everything else of course, but he found her interesting enough to hang around. Their teachers all had different reactions to her though. From Kurenai welcoming her with open arms, to Asuma keeping a small distance but still welcoming, to Kakashi who didn't go anywhere near her in fear that he had somehow messed up in their first meeting. Himiko was currently at a small tea and cake cafe with Ino, Hinata, Sakura, and Kurenai after a long day of training with Yugao. The four of them had made it into a sort of ritual that they would meet here towards the end of every other day to keep up with each other. They had invited the weapon Mistress Stenton, but she proclaimed to have a lot of training to do. Sakura was talking about the things she had bought with the D-rank mission pay that she had been doing alone when Kurenai interrupted her suddenly. Wait, you're doing missions alone, Sakura? I understand why no one can find Sasuke with Kakashi training him somewhere, but what of Naruto? Has he not been willing to help you out or something? Sakura made an unladylike noise and rolled her emerald green eyes. Don't worry Kurenai, I don't any help with these missions. Doing them alone gives me a bigger pay you know. Also, even if I wanted to get some help from that guy I have no idea where he even is to ask him. Hinata looked outside of the window with a worried expression. I haven't seen him either, since the second E exam completely finished. Yeah, come to think of it, I haven't seen that guy anywhere myself, Ino tossed in. Usually you can hear him on the other side of the village, or at least see the mayhem he left behind in one of his pranks, but none of that has happened even once. Kurenai nodded and sipped the tea in front of her. I'm not all that surprised. At times I do forget who we are talking about. He must have found someplace to train and all alone. All the other girls nodded when Kurenai looked at Kimiko who was silently eating a cheesecake. Naruto is the other teammate on Sakura's team. He had beat my student Kiba to make it into the finals of the exam like Ino here. Kimiko looked up to say something, but Ino beat her to the punch. Oh, Kimiko already knows who Naruto is. She is his cousin after all. Kimiko pouted slightly at Ino as the other three looked at her wide-eyed. They didn't need to know that Ino. That could have stayed between me and you now. Ino apologized sheepishly and giggled. Too late now, Kimiko sighed. I am Naruto's cousin though, so yeah I already know who you're talking about. I haven't met him yet, but the Hokage has told me much about him. Naruto. Would he happen to be that shrimpy kid that wore that horrid orange jumpsuit? Everyone turned to face the new voice to find Temari standing near them. Hey there Kimiko. Hey Tamari. How have you been? Kimiko and Tamari had become close friends over time. They always seemed to find each other in the springs, so naturally they decided to get to know each other. Seldomly did the two meet outside of the hot springs unless they accidentally crossed each other's paths during the day. Tamari gave Kimiko a quick hug and smiled at her. Tired, but that's what good training does to you. I came here to see if this tea was any good. That's good for you Tamari. Kimiko hugged her back. The other girls watched, confused at the exchange, from where they sat. Ino though stood next to Kimiko with a questioning look on her face. Placing her hand on Kimiko's shoulder, she pulled the girls apart and looked at her. Huh? Oh, right, where are my manners? Ino, this is Tamari. She is the only other girl than you still in the Chunin exams. Tamari, this is my best friend Ino. The two girls looked at each other with scrutinizing eyes. For some reason Kimiko couldn't figure out, she felt as though attention that wasn't there to begin with had just entered the room. Tamari was looking at Ino with a slight tilt of her head, while Ino was just outright glaring at her with her arms crossed. So, you're her best friend. Yeah. The person she thinks highest of you know. I do better by her than anyone else can, Ino said coldly. Sakura and Hinata visibly flinched at Ino's words, while Kurenai watched the scene before her. She was amused at the amount of possessiveness the girls were able to show with a few words and looks. Tamari smiled and took a step closer to Ino. Well, that's great and all, but don't forget that there is always that one person to top the best friend. That very special person. Ino gritted her teeth in anger as Tamari wrapped her arm around Kimiko's waist, making her laugh. Stop that, you know I'm ticklish there. Ino grabbed Kimiko's shoulders and pulled her away from Tamari. Come on Kimiko, we were having our tea and cake remember. She sat the Kimiko down and sat next to her, never once taking her eyes off a now irritated Tamari. The two girls had half a cake and a full teacup in front of them. Neither is sure when, but one day they stopped ordering separately and started eating the same cake and drinking out of the same cup. No one said anything about since it was obvious to anyone who saw them where the closeness of the girls would eventually lead them to. A closeness Tamari wasn't going to accept. Grabbing a chair, she sat on the other side of Kimiko and smiled. Do you mind if I sit and eat her Kimiko? Actually that seat as Ino began only to be cut off. Tamari held up her hand with a smug grin on her face. I didn't ask you, I asked Kimiko now didn't I? Somewhere someone, inner Sakura getting way out of hand, could be heard going ooh. Making Ino's face go beet red. Placing her hand on top of Kimiko's, Tamari smiled into her eyes kindly. Can I sit here Kimiko? Kimiko smiled back at her and nodded. Of course you can Tamari. You can eat with us whenever you want you know. Tamari smiled triumphantly at Ino, making her face get even redder. Tension between the two became so much greater that people outside the shop could feel it clearly. The atmosphere snuffed out any attempt at a conversation any of the girls made. Hinata's eyes darted between Tamari and Ino, worrying that fight was going to break out at any moment and destroy the cafe. Sakura was watching Ino trying to figure out why her friend was acting so possessive of the girl next to her. Kurenai was looking over at Kimiko to see if the girl knew that she was the cause of the obvious tension. Ino ate what little was left of Kimiko and her cake while glaring at Tamari. Tamari glared back at Ino while sitting with her arms and legs crossed, trying to figure out just how important to Kimiko she really was. Kimiko herself was silently sipping her tea in outward peace. On the inside though she was completely freaking out over the situation at hand. She had never had to deal with a situation like this one and thought it best to stay as quiet as possible. No one knows how much longer those two could stay that close to each other without a fight breaking out between the two of them, be it verbal or physical. Luckily they had a savior walk through the door of the cafe with a cocky grin on his face. Hey brat, I've been looking all over for you. Kimiko sighed and looked behind her. I never thought I would be happy to see you Jiraiya. Where did you run off to? Did you forget you were supposed to be training me? Jiraiya waved her question off and looked at the girls around the table. Are you going to introduce me to your friends Kimiko? Kurenai stood and bowed slightly to Jiraiya. My name is Kurenai Yuuhi. It is an honor to finally make your acquaintance Master Jiraiya. My name is Hinata Hyuga sir. It's nice to meet you. Oh. My name is Sakura Haruno. It is a pleasure to meet someone of your status. Tamari. Ino Yamanaka. Jiraiya struck an awkward pose. It is always nice to meet new faces. Especially lovely ones like yours. Hinata and Sakura blushed while Kimiko and Kurenai gagged and Ino and Tamari looked anywhere but at each other. Seeing the mixed reactions of the girls, Jiraiya decided to cut to the chase. Anyways, Kimiko I need you to come with me. There is something I want to teach and it is going to take some time. Kimiko frowned and glared at him. Oh now you want to teach me something when the exam is just 4 days from now. Whatever it is, it better be useful. Come on Ino, we have to get back to your house now. She grabbed Ino's hand and left. Ino stuck her tongue out at Tamari on their way out. Tamari of course not liking that stopped Kimiko and placed a soft kiss on her cheek. To everyone's shock, Kimiko quickly returned the kiss before leaving. The two girls speedily walked to Ino's house, which wasn't that far away, in silence. Both of them were slightly ticked and didn't see it fit to talk at the moment. When they reached Ino's home, Ino dragged Kimiko to her room. "So what's going on between you and this Tamari girl?" she suddenly asked. Kimiko blinked in confusion. "What do you mean what's going on? I and she are friends, Ino." Ino looked down at her feet and frowned. "Ino, what is it? You've been acting really off and it's making me feel real uncomfortable around you right now." The blonde balled her fist and closed her eyes. "If you two are just friends, what was that kiss about then? Why did you kiss her back if you two are just friends?" Kimiko grabbed Ino's hand and held onto it. "Ino, you are overreacting. I've always kissed her goodbye whenever we part ways. It's just a friendly thing between us." Ino looked at Kimiko, shocked that this was nowhere near the first time the two have kissed. Ino tore her hands away from Kimiko. "Why? I don't get what she has done that I haven't. Is it or I'll get bigger breasted, that's what it is? Just tell me what it is, Kimiko. I thought we knew each other." A slap sound through the house. Ino looked up stunned at Kimiko, who stood over with an open palm. Ino's hand slowly crept up to her reddening cheek as she started to cry. "I'm sorry, but that is enough, Ino. I've told you me and her are friends already. If you have a problem with us being friends, then maybe you aren't as great a friend as I thought you were." Ino gasped and quickly stood up. "Kimiko, don't say that. I just don't understand why I'm sorry. I can handle your friendship with her, okay? I can handle anything." Ino took slow steps forward until she was able to wrap her arms around Kimiko. "I'm sorry." Kimiko sighed and held onto the shaking girl before letting her go and leaving. Stepping outside of the house, Kimiko looked up at the setting sun. Its effect on the sky had always amazed her. Just looking at it usually made her feel better, but now it made her feel as if she just wasn't truly ready for anything. Seeing Jiraiya waiting down the empty street for her, Kimiko looked back at Ino's house before walking over to him. The Kane watched sadly as Kimiko tried to completely comprehend the foreign territory that she had found herself in. "I hope you can handle the truth, Ino Yamanaka. You and everyone else who will soon know the truth."